Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. There's Chris. Chris is on there now, so, okay, great. Good morning, Chris. All right, you turn your mic on. You're not here, I'm not hearing you. No. You hearing now? Okay. Yeah, and there's Lance. Good morning, Lance. All right. Okay. Chris, are you on now?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah. Just turn it
All right,
up,
perfect.
maybe turn you up a little bit more. Can you turn him up a little bit? Yeah. Go ahead, test, go ahead, Chris.
How about now?
Much better. Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect.
All right, so good morning, everyone. This is the start of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. We are going to move through the agenda fairly quickly as we can. You can see that the meetings are set pretty quickly. 8:30 through 10 will be presentations, actually 10:30, and then we'll break. We may be able to go a little bit quicker than that, so anybody who's watching and following along, we may do a little bit quicker because some of the stuff is things that we've already seen before, so there's no really surprises here. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the December 28th, 2021 CIP meeting.
I'll make that motion.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. All right. And
Aye.
Okay. And Chris is raising his hand, and, okay.
Going to abstain.
You're
from
gonna,
that.
and Dan's gonna abstain. Okay, great.
Do we have to roll call because somebody's not here?
I'll call him out, because since we're all here,
Okay.
I'll just call Chris's. Chris did vote yes, and so the rest, and so we have four in favor and one abstention. Okay, great. All right, thank you. All right, so let's move on to the first, just about 8:35. Bob Cutler in elections registrations, and he probably has this presentation down pat by now, so.
Yeah, it's pretty
straightforward.
so,
Okay. The big question is going to be, has the price changed at all?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I saw the vendor who gave the original quote in February and asked him to give a new quote, and it's essentially the same.
Okay, good.
So I have that here too, and I can
Excellent.
provide that to you guys if you need a copy.
So that's about 35,000 for everything?
That's what we put in for the budget. I think it comes in a little less than that, and I think
Good.
it might cover the first year of maintenance, so.
Okay, great.
So that'd be good.
Okay. Is it maintenance free in the first year, or is it not?
It's maintenance free for 2 years,
For 2 years, okay.
and then after that, every year you have to pay
All right.
to maintain the machines.
So can you pay it up front? And then, so that would
I
give
don't know
you
if you'd
the,
want to pay it up front, but that's a possibility.
so that way you can extend it to 3 years instead
Yeah.
of 2, that
Yeah.
type of thing. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, if the money's there, that might make some sense, so.
Why don't you just explain to the committee here what you're asking for, just so, because I know Dan and Stefan probably have
yeah.
not heard this before, so.
So essentially, the equipment that we have now was bought in 2007. It was first used for the town election in 2007. They say the voting machines have a useful life of 15 to 20 years, so we're already at 15 years. The biggest problem is that now that they've moved into the newer versions of the voting equipment, they just aren't maintaining them as much because they don't have the parts to maintain them. So once the older machines go off the market, they salvage whatever parts that they can to maintain customers that have those machines. The machines, fine, they work fine, except when we get to a big election like we had in 2020. And the biggest problem is that, especially with the increased early voting, all of those ballots are folded ballots, and these machines do not like folded ballots. It jams them up, it plays with the counts, so you really have to be very precise when you're putting them into these machines. And we had probably 2/3 of our ballots were folded ballots in 2020, which was the first time ever. So the whole day, we're just unjamming machines and, and they just don't, and voter integrity is the biggest piece of it. And I have concerns that if we have another election like that with these machines, I just wouldn't be confident that, you know, it would give us what we need, you know.
Are you gonna have any trouble getting the machines at all?
The newer ones?
Yeah.
I don't think so, but, you know, with the supply chain issues, I'm not sure. And the other thing is that even if this gets approved, gets voted on, the money's available July 1st, we would not be able to use them in that first election in September because the Board of Selectmen has to vote to replace the machines, and it has to be done 90 days before an election.
So I'm glad you said that, because this is a little bit different this year, and I probably should have started off by saying this, but this year, the funding sources are, we've had one additional funding source, which is the ARPA, federal ARPA money. And which means that we do not have to wait for town meeting for that approval. So we could actually utilize the funding now. So as soon as the committee recommends and the selectmen approve, we could potentially go forward on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we don't have to wait. We have the funding in place now, a portion of it.
Well, half
It is-
of it,
Yeah, we have half of it for now, and another half's coming in June.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just the town's portion. There is the county portion, which is still an area that we're still trying to get clarification on, but we still could potentially use some of that money as well for some of the items that's on the list today.
Okay.
So I would suggest to the committee that, that maybe we look at that as a possibility of moving forward in that without delaying that, so you could actually have that ready for the
Okay.
You
elections
think
in
that would be
September.
ready by September of like?
Well, we'd have to go
so?
through the RFP process. There are only two
Two
versions
versions.
out there.
Yeah.
You have LHS and ES&S, so I'd want to have a little committee. I'd involve
Yeah.
Audrey from, who
Sure.
does that, and we would review the two
Yep.
proposals and then move from there. So depending on how quickly that could move along.
There's no state bid for that?
They both probably state bid on that.
Oh, then you don't need to RFP it, if
Yeah,
that's the
okay.
case. So you can take it right off the state bid,
Okay,
so which is good, so that's even easier.
yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're both state bid.
Good. All right, if that's the case, then you may want to look at them both
Yeah,
to see which one's better for you, but.
yeah,
Saves you all the advertising and all that other.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So, okay, all right, any questions from the committee on that?
No, no. Even though I haven't
Bob.
been here, I've watched Bob's presentation a few times, so.
Yeah, it's actually ingrained in everybody's mind, I think, on this committee, so.
For some reason, I thought we did it in the, I don't know.
We
why.
wanted to, we really did,
Yeah.
we've wanted to a couple times, we just haven't been able to get to it, though, because he's basically said several times that, you know, we have, he says, we'll be okay, but he says, I really am, it's getting down to the point where we gotta do something, so we're at that point now, so, okay. Very
perfect,
good.
thank you.
All right, thanks.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too, thanks, Bob. Good to get out early, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, the next one is, good morning, Bill. Is Aaron Heyer, for technology, information systems? Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, how are you?
Good.
Good, so this next capital item, it's for the townwide information systems. These funds are used to fund capital replacement of townwide computer and networking equipment. The Joint Technology Department started out with collaboration of personnel in about 2013, and in 2014, we implemented a townwide data center, which consists of one center located at the high school and one center located at the Joint Public Safety System. This provides high availability for all townwide networking services. These systems are also synchronously replicated to provide for failover between the school and the town site. A lot of this equipment, it's aging, and we've gotten a lot of value out of it in terms of both the perpetual licensing and the hardware standpoint. It's upwards of 8 years old at this point. Last year, we requested a capital of $150,000 as a project to support a townwide storage area networking upgrade of townwide switching equipment, and also client and email protection technology, as well as the network firewalls. So that, I think due to funding constraints last year with capital, that item was reduced. Unfortunately, this caused us not to be able to move forward with a couple of projects here. So again, we're here asking for $150,000 to continue the refresh of this equipment. Again, this also represents kind of the town's investment in the shared data services and data centers between the town and the schools as well. So it's really required, it's really important to keep the equipment up to date and keep the town moving forward in terms of technology.
Questions from the committee?
So it was partially funded last year?
Yeah, what did we spend, like 100,000
100,000 last year.
100,000 instead of 150, yeah. We just couldn't afford to do it all.
Yeah.
How much are you gonna need year over year? Is this gonna keep going?
Yeah, the projection for the 5-year capital plan it stays level at 150,000. We definitely are seeing increased costs right now. So projects that we were looking at last year, we're seeing upwards of a 25% increase in the cost of expenses. We've been able to lock in pricing on a lot of items. We are getting the point where we're getting price change notifications from vendors letting us know that if we don't proceed, in the next, 30 to 90 days on some of these, that there will be price increases. We do have resources available. We're trying to mitigate any increases in terms of expense increases by starting, to do procurements on products we know that the increases are coming.
Okay.
The other piece too is in terms of, I think everybody knows in terms of the global supply chain and technology that there's large, long lead times on a lot of these items. So, the quicker we can get orders in and start our planning, then the more likely we are to get the equipment on site when we need it and then avoid any increase in expense.
Is this updating hardware or software?
It's a combination of hardware and perpetual software licenses. So,
Yeah.
so these are owned licenses. So that the software, it's a one-time purchase that gives us access to use the software. So we own the software versus a software as a service where you're paying like a monthly fee to use the software. There is also perpetual maintenance fees, though, that are involved. So those are the fees, typically 20% of the acquisition of the software goes towards maintenance, and that guarantees you upgrades, support.
And that's part of the initial sunk cost, right?
Yeah.
That's just, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see if it should be put into our year over year budget versus
We've had
capital.
that-
But if it's the sunk cost up front, you
Yeah,
don't really
these-
negotiate those things. They're just kind of in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are, these are truly their capital, the expenses, a capital purchase. And again, some of that perpetual maintenance is built in case, in this case, the example of the data center, there's a lot of perpetual licensing bought back in 2014. So that license, those licenses, we've been maintaining those, for the years past when the maintenance expired.
Okay.
We have talked about that, Dan. It's a good point that, because these are things that come up every year. And we actually did that with police cruisers. We finally just put it right in the budget and said, because it's something that we see every year. And you could even make the same argument for school buses, right? Because they're coming up every single year, that we should maybe look into to sink those into the budget process itself directly. So, okay. All right. Go ahead.
The perpetual type software model is becoming obsolete because it's not as, it doesn't produce quite the revenues, right, that a software as a service does for these companies. So it's getting harder and harder to move forward with perpetual licensing. When we do a cost benefit analysis on it, we obviously get a good cost benefit from it. But it is very likely, within the next, year to 24 months, that we will have to move to a subscription-based licensing model for some of these services, and at which time I think you're correct that we'll need to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it'll just be a yearly
moving those
budget
over.
expense as opposed to a capital. cost.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, cool.
All right. Further questions, comments from the committee? Chris, anything? You all set? Amy? Okay, great. All right, thanks. Thanks, Sarah. All right, next up, I probably should have done this earlier, but why don't they just go around the table so everybody knows, the listening public can knows who we are? George, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm George Samia, Finance Director.
Dan Peterson, Vice Chair of the Advisory Committee.
Amy Bordeaux, Superintendent of Schools.
Bill Keegan, Town Manager.
Stephanie McGowan, Board of Selectmen, Assistant Chair, Vice Chair.
Vice Chair.
Where assistant came from, I don't know, Vice Chair.
All right, Chris Gallagher.
I'm Chris Gallagher, I'm the DPW Director.
Great, thank you. All right, I'll go to Bill Euchner and Tony. And Tony, you're not going to be here tonight, or just Bill? Yeah, I didn't have to be. It didn't have to be. You covered anyway, for the most part. So.
Sorry, Chris, I didn't know you were going to be remote. So sent you this, but this is a little bit of backup.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So as far as the building committee, the facilities department, there really isn't anything on the list, except I still think you should consider approval, even though it's not on the list, of the demolition of the laundry building, just so that's on record. Obviously, funding, we're hoping to come from another source, not taxpayers' money, but
It's not on the list because we've already approved it. All right, so we just haven't funded it yet.
Okay.
All right, so it's
Did
actually,
approve.
yeah, we
Okay.
did approve, yeah.
all right, good, thanks. As far as the schools go, it's kind of our standard request, coupling on top of Aaron's previous thing on technology. You know, as we have said before, we split the cost kind of between the town and the schools relative to equipment upgrades. You know, with the 2 data centers, obviously, there's a significant amount of cost associated with that, but there's also a significant amount of cost associated with the networks within our 5 buildings at this point. Our wireless network obviously continues to need to be upgraded, and we work on that as we go through. You know, software, as you'll probably see in our main budget, you're going to see significant increases in our software licensing because of what happened over the last 2 years with COVID and having to go to a one-to-one environment. But just the overall software and computer systems. We were very fortunate under COVID to be able to buy the laptops that we bought in the 300 range. They're now selling for 600 plus. So even getting parts for those is costing us as much as it cost us for the original computers at this point. They, you know, are used daily on the middle school, high school. They're used on the elementary level, but not to the same level, so they should hopefully last a little bit longer than the high school level, as an example. So we'll do our best to kind of trade out. But again, the problems, I think if you look at what the value of our entire network on town and school side is, we're in the multi-million range at this point. So to maintain it, if you think about it, we're kind of looking at less than a 20% a year between the town side ask and the school side ask to keep this up. And I really have to credit the tech department for their ability. You may or may not know that they're licensed to be a Lenovo service center, which saves us a lot of time and a lot of money. And gets us equipment to be able to repair things much faster for both the town and the school side. Again, that's something that they were required to do, but something that they did on their own, and I think really proves to be valuable to the town. One of the biggest things that we didn't get to do, I think, at this point, that was been delayed and it's going to cost both the town and the school side, is our storage capacity. One of the biggest things that we really wanted to try to do last year, but again, realizing that the money wasn't there for both sides. Both sides took, town side took a $50,000 cut, the school side took a $100,000 cut in what was asked for. So obviously we couldn't move forward with those. Storage is critical to us. You know, we had an event just recently that if we didn't have the ability to have the backups that we have and systems that we have, we could be destroyed as a town as far as timing of being able to continue to operate, not just the schools, but, you know, police and fire and town hall. So, again, that equipment a lot of it's original from when we did the data centers. A few things have been upgraded, but not a lot of it, because we planned on doing it as a one-step kind of transition. So that's where the 200,000 is coming from. Our software licensing and stuff, as similar to on Aaron's side, we try to buy things with multi-year licenses when we first buy them, but we also try to get things to last twice as long as they're technically asked to, so then we have to renew licenses after that. But that's on our town side, but our school side budget, so it's not a CIP item.
In terms of the school, technology CIP too, I think everybody's aware at this point that the district, again, went one-to-one during COVID. We were able to access federal and grant funds to do that. But that also required a totally different infrastructure to support, mobile learning, mobile devices. So we went from a model where all of our computer resources, all of our technology were housed within our buildings, to now supporting over 3,000 laptops that could be, realistically could be anywhere in the world, right? We know they're in this geographic area, but we're supporting them whether they're home or whether they're here. So in terms of that refresh, I know we've begun investigating, opportunities for refresh, but that's 3,000 laptops, which will likely come due for refresh at the same time or within a 1 to 2 year period of each other. So looking at options in terms of if there's a way to create some kind of technology stabilization fund, right, to be able to fund that big refresh of equipment and be prepared to do that. At the same time, a lot of the equipment which we once thought was kind of like a one-time investment in the building, or was thought of that way, is no longer. So like wireless access points, right? So I remember talking probably to this group and being asked, are all the buildings wireless? And the answer was yes. So then it was like, okay, we can check that box off. We met that goal, all the buildings have wireless. Well, as the technology changes, just like at your home, the computers are now coming to us with Wi-Fi 6 technology. It's just the next generation of wireless access. The access points that we have, they don't support the Wi-Fi 6. And then as we move forward, as we go forward, that technology which we have becomes obsolete. So a lot of these projects or these implementations, which were even done outside of these, maybe as separate capitals, for instance, interactive technology or projectors in school classrooms, were thought of as a one-time purchase. Now what we're seeing is the bulbs for these projectors are no longer available.
That costs as much as the projector itself at this point.
The crosswalks which we use to really leverage the infrastructure that we have. So for years and years and years, Epson had a short throw platform, mounting platform, which is how the projector mounts and what the cabling looks like. And as a new projector with new technology came in, you could continue to use that platform. So you were leveraging all your prior investment in cabling, mounting, installation, all of that. There's probably 400 plus rooms or installations that use this platform. With the situation in terms of limited chips and supply with COVID, lots of companies have downsized their product portfolios, and they really are focusing on their highest margin products. So these products which provided a lot of value and that we were able to leverage, they've been discontinued. So we're seeing this in a number of different areas. So now we're having to look at, are we going to move forward with a new projector platform? The new projectors are laser. They don't use bulbs. And in a lot of cases, the life rating on the laser is less than what we're seeing on what we're getting out of bulb units with bulb replacements. So those units are literally disposable projectors. You can't re-laser them. Once the laser wears out, they become dim or they go out. You just replace the whole projector versus an interactive display.
And they're not cheap.
They're not, no. Versus interactive display technology, again, requiring new installations, different types of cabling, right? So typically what we're seeing is the the installation costs and implementation costs are equal to the equipment costs. So if we're looking at a $3,000 projector system, we're probably around $2,300 to $2,400 in installation costs. So that's removing and uninstalling the old equipment, buying all the new cabling and all the new labor and equipment needed for installation. So
If you can get the equipment.
if you can get it, but yeah, as Bill mentioned, the laptops. I mean, I think we really lucked out. We went out using some of the state bids. We got really aggressive pricing. Our per unit cost in terms of the laptop hardware alone was around $275. We've been doing the warranty work in-house, but we also been doing out-of-warranty work in-house. So when a screen cracks because the computer gets dropped, that's not covered under warranty, so we have to purchase those parts. Those parts were around $200 when we started the program. And as of recently, the replacement part for the screen alone is up over $325 right now. So
More than the computer.
yeah. So, but the replacement cost for the computer right now is over $500. So in terms of, we get really aggressive. We're able to get really aggressive pricing, kind of in the really early uncertain times of COVID, and then quickly those prices escalated right away. But we had locked our pricing in, and again we ordered parts and had materials on hand, so we weren't seeing that increased rise in expense, but we're seeing it now because the costs are high and there's limited supply. Like Lenovo themselves actually doesn't have any supply, and then any of the distribution supply, like I said, the price is up over $300, and there's no because of the limited manufacturing capability. There's not a lot of aftermarket part options either. So there's typically like OEM equivalent parts that will become available for these types of machines. Those parts aren't available, and again, the companies themselves are focusing on the products that yield them the highest profits. So, they're filling orders literally in that kind of that, rank and file in terms of what do they have the biggest margins on and what do they have the lowest margins on, and the lowest margin products come last. So.
Very good. Okay. Questions from the committee?
So the next three items are basically bus replacement. Back in 2021, I think you all remember we got rejected on buses because of the financial side of it. Last year, we were able to do 2 through the CIP and 2 through the school department's end-of-year budget funds that we had savings from payrolls and other things where we had not been able to run programs like extra activities and sporting goods, sporting stuff like that. So we did place those orders immediately upon approval in town meeting, and we still don't have the equipment, likely won't have the equipment until July. We've just received a notice that kind of under a force majeure type scenario that the vehicle costs are up $3,000 from what our original pricing was. We have, we're negotiating with them at this point to try to minimize that increase, but they also have warned us that next year's increase is going to be even more significant than that. We have converted as a town to gas-fired engines versus the diesel engines. Ironically, the original gas-fired engines were cheaper than the diesel engines by thousands. The reality is they don't sell enough of them, so the demand on the gas engine is not as much as it is on the diesel engines. And the manufacturer of the gas engine basically is the one that's holding up the manufacturer with these engines. So the advantage, and Chris can speak to this, I met with both Chris and Adam the other day, just is there's a couple problems with diesel engines when it comes to school buses. Based on the fact that we don't allow buses to idle, sitting there in a parking lot waiting for the kids, a diesel engine wants to run. It just wants to stay on and keep going. It's the best thing you can do for it. A gas engine doesn't care. You turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. So our diesel engines really end up with more problems because of those short cycles than the gas engines do. Secondly, the gas engines are easier to service, And the third thing is a diesel engine was originally designed for large, long-haul trucks and bigger equipment that's going to run constantly because of its life of 200 to 300,000 miles. Well, we don't put 200 to 300,000 miles on buses because by the time we get 10 years out, which is really the kind of the trademark of getting rid of them for safety reasons, because the undercarriage with salt and everything else starts to become a problem, we're only at 100,000 miles. So we're paying for an engine that effectively doesn't do us the justice of what a diesel engine is supposed to do. The concern is, like we are right now, and we're in a situation where without those 4 buses, 2 from 2 years ago, 2 from last year, we're really in a critical situation when it comes to going out and doing our field trips and our athletic trips and stuff, because we have just a few more than our baseline. If you look at the list that I gave you, what you'll see on it is the top ones in yellow. One of them's already been traded in as part of the deal because it was no longer operational, so they took it and took it out. The other 3, basically, we won't put on the road for mechanical reasons. And the 3 in orange color are the ones that we're looking to replace. Again, you can tell they're all 2011s, so they're even older than what we typically would have been in a cycle of redoing. The biggest, no matter what you have for funding, the biggest issue we have to have is the minibus that's the wheelchair accessible. The one we have now is in trouble. And, you know, it is one that is required because obviously we pick up a couple of children in town that need to have that type of equipment involved. I'm a little concerned at the pricing I'm showing you. I think with trades and stuff, we'll be close. But I'm, you know, if they're right and that these are all going up by close to $6,000, it's going to be very close on the cost factor. If I were going to put them in a rank, I would put the 2 minibuses first, and then the 77 passenger as the final one. And as I said, the wheelchair would be number 1. All right. The next thing is our typical ask on copiers. Again, you know, we've been doing pretty well stretching the copier lives because of service contracts. We buy 3-year service contracts on all equipment when we buy it up front. And we're pushing all the copiers to 1.5 million or more copies, which is really a little bit beyond the life of most of them. But, you know, we've got a good service group that's through the vendor, and that's worked for us. But, you know, again, you know, it's an annual cost, quite honestly, to a budget point of view. This one I really do believe should be a budget item because each one is less than the 25,000 and probably should be just moved forward in that place.
Do we use less copies now that most kids have computers, or is it?
You would hope, but the answer is no.
Just wondering.
A lot of it is because, you know, especially on the elementary, they still do a lot of stuff with worksheets and things of that nature that they can work with. Some of it is extra materials that, you know, we may not have as a book per se, but we want to be able to hand out to students and stuff like that to go through.
All the exams are still done paper too, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, most of the exams are online, actually.
They do
No,
some
those are the easier ones, yeah.
There's so a lot of the instructional practices, you know, again, we went to one-to-one computing in the middle of a pandemic with remote learning, with hybrid learning, right? So really asking a lot of people in terms of doing the best they can to provide and get instructional materials to students. And during that time, there were you know, several months during the pandemic where we weren't one-to-one, where you know, teachers were still sending home materials to students for remote learning. So, you know, I do predict that over time, as some of the instructional practices, right, continue to move towards digital learning, that you'll see some decrease, but you know, the copy materials for the time being anyway, and even the foreseeable future, right, those still are much needed parts of what we're doing.
And to Aaron's point, I would think that we'll start to see more of a decrease on the upper secondary level, high school level, working its way down. I think elementary will always have a certain demand.
Yeah, right.
So, the final item, which again, I gave you a list of what the request is from Cami Totoli, is our band, or music department head. As you may recall, we proposed a 3-year plan here because it was a pretty significant ask. It was, I think at the time originally, we were at about $175,000. We did last year's as a combination, mostly coming fortunately out of money we had left in our operating budget, and we're able to pick up a lot of the bigger, older equipment. This is the second year of that plan at $55,000, and the third year is at $50,000. Again, much of this equipment is, 25-plus years old. It's gotten to the point where maintaining it, unfortunately, is not as much of an option as it used to be. We do try to service things to get as much life out of them as we can, but that's basically what the $56,000 is broken down to. And again, you can see some fairly, single items that are, the set one sack's at $15,000. I mean, you can't expect a student to buy that.
They don't want to cover that cost for us?
Yeah, yeah. A tuba at $9,500, so I think there's things that when they last 25 years, you get your money out of them, but again, it's not something that most families could afford to buy, and if you don't have them within your program, you obviously don't have the capability of doing what our music program has done over the years. So,
Have you ever tried appealing to the Bach music program, the Ernie Bach music?
from what I've heard, and I haven't talked to them directly, but from what I've heard, their tendency is more on smaller price things where more kids can get access to them than it is on your bigger band, marching band type equipment, stuff like that.
So Bill, too, just quick question, because I know nothing about music equipment. So, like, you have 2 Barry saxes here, one costs $6,000, one costs $15,000. Are they the same saxophone but different manufacturers, or?
Well, they are different manufacturers in this particular case, but they're also a different style
Okay.
and
Different model.
complexity of
Yeah.
the item itself.
Yeah.
So.
I was just wondering, I mean, such a big
Yeah.
difference.
Well, it's kind of like, most people would be familiar with a piano or an organ. You can buy a very simple piano for $1,000, or you can buy a Steinway and
Yeah.
spend $100,000,
Yeah.
So it's the same thing happens with this equipment as far as the levels of equipment that you're actually operating under. And they all sound different, and they're all
Okay.
used differently.
Yeah.
So the final item, school committee did approve the process to move forward. There's no money involved in FY23 at this point. It would actually end up coming back to a special town meeting, but I just wanted to put it out in front of the committee so that they know it's moving forward, is that the Taylor School renovation, we will be putting in a statement of interest. Don't think, honestly, that we will get any kind of movement from the state in the first time we do it. It took 3 times with the borough. So this could be 3 years out before we even get approval. The only kind of money we would ever need to spend if in the short run here, potentially would be a study. If we had to bring in an architect to do a review of the building, similar to what we did with the borough, determine what the real issues are, so that we can continue the process of moving forward. But we won't even know after putting in the statement of interest, to be honest with you, probably until close to the end of the year, if they even accepted it. So that's why I'm not too concerned about the money at this point, but again, want to keep it in the, the view of the committee, so.
So Bill, are you guys expecting, well, and of course now the cost of this project will be much more than the cost, because that's what's happening now. Are you guys, like, I know at the borough, we were able to go and the selectmen were able to go take a tour of the grand opening, and quite impressive, first of all. And I know you've moved the preschool there and stuff like that. Do you think your renovation, what you think you might have planned for the Taylor is something similar, or maybe the cost might be the same, but maybe, not as much as what you guys did? Have you ever guys, I was just curious if there's a thought process?
The facility side, we've looked at it and had some conversations with Amy and others, but the reality is it would be similar in scope to the borough, except unless It wouldn't have a pre-K. The pre-K's been at the borough, but we made its own pre-K wing this time, which actually has facilities that are designed for pre-K versus just regular classrooms. Very different animal. The state and federal government keep pushing towards universal pre-K. We could never handle that with just 3 rooms, obviously, at the borough, but we can handle the needs of the current community. If in this process that were to start to morph to become more and more of a concern that we would have to have it, then we would be very smart to consider putting a pre-K wing on that building, because there's just no way you would ever be able to do it within the borough project. Borough has always worked great as our pre-K scenario, because we could keep it consolidated. It's even nicer now. It's got its own entrance. It's got, its own capabilities. It's somewhat separated from the other school, but can use all of the tools that the main part of the school has. But again, it's servicing kids currently, not so much on the universal method. It's currently servicing some kids 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week, depending on what their needs are. Obviously, you get to a universal, you're pretty much daily. So, and it's 2.5 to 5, so it's basically 3 class levels, if you will. And we're running, class levels now that are close to 200 kids a class level. So there'd be 600 kids in pre-K. So it's a major swing if the government ever really pushes to that, which I just don't see how it could happen. But if it did, that would be the thing you'd have to consider. But otherwise, what I think you would do is you would do similar to what we did, potentially with a new gym, because the gym and cafeteria areas need to be redone so that they are not disruptive to the classroom curriculum, which they kids playing basketball and the ball bounces off the door as the teacher's trying to teach right next to it all the time. Kids are at lunch yelling and screaming, having a great time at lunch, but there's a class trying to go on right in the room that's right next to it. So you'd want to break those down into different types of rooms and use them differently and move things around.
Just like anything over the years, the needs change, from when these buildings were built, and just another opportunity to say how impressed I was, and I knew the borough because my kids went to the borough. So, to walk in and look at the transformation, and special needs child that I had wasn't at the borough, but to see what was in place, I will just want to say one more time, another way to say it, because people may be watching this meeting. If you have a chance to go and take a look at where your tax money went, incredible. You guys did a phenomenal job, and I'm sure it will be the same with Taylor.
And again, I always come back to the fact that the town has maintained buildings. We've had that design of having a facilities department for years, and the schools have, in particular, have done a very good job at doing that, not cutting that as our first thing when we needed to. The bones of the buildings are good. And if you have that, that can save you a lot of money. I mean, yes, we spent $34 million on renovating that building. But, to date, we have renovated all of our town buildings or built brand new ones like the one we're sitting in for just, over $100 million, where sometimes we spent that on one building.
One building, yeah.
I think we've done very well as a community, but it's because we've maintained what we have. When you don't do that, that's when it costs you real
That's
money.
when it gets very expensive.
I just have one more comment/question, just so people know too. The minibuses run much differently than, those buses are going all day long because you have some kids that go half days and stuff. So I would guess that maybe you don't get the same years out of a minibus as a regular, so people know that, it's not just a bus, they run quite differently.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Basically, a minibus, we actually even run our whole transportation network a little bit differently because of them. So our minibus drivers, there's 4 of them, are on 8-hour days, 5 days a week. They obviously will bring the children into school in the morning and drop them off in the afternoon. But we have many programs where we're taking kids out of the schools to enrich their education, both all the way from elementary all the way up, but a lot on the high school level, to get these children out into the community to have learning opportunities, so that the buses are really on call all day long, and they're moving all day long. Some kids are coming and going from the pre-K that, you know, that need to come in. They're not there all day long. So there's definitely a different thing versus a bus that's coming in the morning and going. And also, if we're running a smaller trip into Boston where we only have to bring in 9 kids or something like that, we're not going to take one of the full-size buses just because it's hard to park them. It's hard to, you know, move them around. So the minibus, although we've switched to a minibus that looks exactly like the full-size bus, it's just a little bit shorter. Because again, we get the same engines, we can get everything that we want that way, instead of the old style that were a little smaller looking. They all cost the same money, so we went to this to have somewhat of a consistency from a facilities maintenance point of view a mechanical maintenance point of view. And it seems to have worked out well, but you're right, they're just run all day long, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other
Can I ask a
questions?
question? Yeah, just because I've seen it on 22 CIP request stuff, and we have a little form on the outlet that we just got handed, the chiller replacement. Why do I keep seeing
Okay, so.
information on that? I just want to, I don't know, is it closed? Is it
Yeah,
ongoing?
no. So that was the third document that I handed you as a supplemental thing. So last year, the CIP committee agreed to sponsor the replacement of one of the 2 chillers at the Ahern at a cost of $235,000. It's been funded, it's encumbered, the engineering is complete on it. We have one last tweak before we go out to bid. However, if the ARPA funds have a limitation on what they can be used for, and it's basically, you know, infrastructure and facilities type things, and if the chillers actually qualify for the ARPA funds, the suggestion that in conversations with Bill and George and Marie that we had was to basically fund replacing both of the chillers. So again, I'd like you to consider the second chiller, but only obviously if the ARPA funds are available and if they're usable, not to come from free cash or anything.
Right.
And if that were the case, we would fund both of them through the ARPA funds and return the 235 that we currently have encumbered back into free cash, which would help support the town in a different way. So we've got a pretty good plan there if the money can be used this way. And that would give you basically upgrading the middle school air conditioning system, which is 22 years old, so that you get another 22 years because you'll have the whole thing be the same,
Right.
you know, level and the same age. And if you can do them both at the same time, to be honest with you, you definitely will save some money. So
And we do think that's a reasonable request, by the way, and it might, very, very well might qualify, and especially under the county funds, which I think would be a good way to address that.
right. So again, all we're asking for you is to approve it based on those
On the funding,
funds.
on the funding.
And if that happens, great. If it doesn't, then we'll move forward with the one that
And
we're.
we'll get into that discussion a little bit down the road, because it's, there are a few things afterwards that we want to talk about, Bill, but, so I appreciate if you could stick around for a while on that point, because they were talking some facility discussions as well that we want to get into later on.
Just one piece in terms of additional clarification. So we talked about both the town capital request and the school capital request. So I already explained that some of the projects that we're unable to move forward with because we didn't have complete funding. And partly what the reason is for that is that we do have these synchronously replicated systems that provide us this high availability, that provide us disaster recovery. We're not able to move forward with buying one half of that set of equipment.
Oh, yeah.
Because really, the issue is in terms of the life cycle of equipment, that if we move forward in the next year, that equipment may no longer be
Yeah,
available.
they got to be compatible too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to those have to be purchased at once. So that's why, it's important that we receive this funding so we can move forward to finish those projects, yeah.
All right, other questions, comments, school department?
One comment about the chiller. I mean, I think it's good to, when you have a little experience in something or the need for something. I just wanted to say about the chiller, one thing to think, oh, we just want, kids not to be really hot and stuff like that. But, what happens too is, I have a special needs child, so I can speak to some of this stuff. My son was at the Ahern during the summer hours, during the summertime. And you know what happens? Just think of how a person who is mentally capable of dealing with being warm and stuff, you put disabled children, it become, some of these kids can't even function when it's, when they're hot. And some of them don't have the capability to understand why they feel the way they do. It's just, I don't feel, it's hot, I don't want to do anything. So just a little something to put forward that nobody likes to have to be doing work in an environment that is uncomfortable, and you throw kids, and some kids with disabilities, and I know there's a big program that goes on at the Ahern, it's not the young kids, so just something to throw out there that, the need is there.
Yeah, I mean, to Amy's point, I mean, to
Stephanie's point.
Steph's point, so the design right now for the school department is that we have the middle school, which allows us to run the bulk of our summer programs through the air-conditioned side of it, and obviously the high school and stuff like that aren't as good that way. We did the Borough the same way so that we could run all of our younger special needs and elementary level programs in that building. So now we have that capability of 2 different buildings that give us, and we're running those programs from July through the middle of August.
Yep.
So it really is the hottest time of the year to do that. Yes, it's nice on the other 2 ends that you can kind of keep the building a little bit more comfortable, but quite honestly, the biggest issue is that we are running 5-week programs that really.
I think what's particularly important here is the fact that it makes no sense to me to replace one, knowing that the other's gonna go probably right behind it.
Well, we've already lost one compressor
Yeah, we've
on the
lost
second
one,
one,
yeah,
so
so you're on the second.
it's
So-
only running at basically half of its.
But I think it also makes sense, if you're gonna buy 2, you probably get a better price.
Well, you don't get a
Most
better
likely.
price, you get a better price on install,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, install, right.
Can I ask a question though? And I don't know exactly how this works. I only know from work, but what's the lead times on these? When are they gonna get installed, and when are we gonna get invoiced? And does that matter with the budget? Or once the funds are allocated,
Yeah,
you're
once-
good?
Once they're
So like
encumbered.
if they're encumbered in 22 and you don't get it until 24 because they have chips that need to come from wherever and you can't get them, it's fine. It's fine.
That's right, yeah, it's a
Okay.
capital item, so which is different than
Yep.
an operating budget item.
Okay, cool.
Any further questions from the committee? All right, thanks, Bill, appreciate it.
I do have to go to Connecticut, so I don't know when you're.
Okay, so, just real quickly, the items that we had at the very end were things that we talked about at the last meeting in December, which were related to the fact that we really have a number of items relating to buildings, et cetera. You touched upon one of them, Bill, with respect to the Taylor School, but we've also talked about the community center. We've talked about the high school generator replacement, fuel pumps at the DPW, which could be rolled into the project. It's the whole bigger project, Chris, in dealing with the facility over there. Catch basin cleaning truck, PFAS treatment plant, which is coming down the road, which we probably will see through another grant program anyways, more than likely. Dams, stormwater management, water meter replacements, fire substation. Those are all things that we've discussed at the meeting in December. I think all those have different tracks in which they can follow at this point in time. What's a particular concern to me, because I know this is sort of like an open question right now, but we talked about the fact that some of our debt service is rolling off, particularly as it relates to debt exclusion projects, high school and middle school, if I'm not mistaken. Or I think it's public safety, not for that matter. Public safety is coming off. So we think that there may be an opportunity for us to move forward on the community center project as sooner. So I guess what we need to talk about is what would be the next steps, and because we're talking a couple of years from now, 2025. So if we're going to talk about that, we should really be talking about it now. So to start planning for that.
So I would, and I'm not trying to pit one against the other, but I would say that the DPW's garage is a critical need. Now, it's a smaller project, so it's.
So let me just let me just address that, because I agree with you 100%. So we actually have talked about the prospect of this, and this really depends a lot on the billboard issue that's going to come up at town meeting this year. Because if we get the billboard zoning correctly, the revenue that could come from the bill could potentially pay for the improvements to the DPW facility. So I do think that is within the cards at this point. So we may have the ability to pay for that project without having to borrow for it.
Yeah, and I would suggest,
Or
as a taxpayer only, that it might be a wise move to, if that billboard thing were to pass, because I'm sure there will be opinions both ways as far as taxpayers are concerned, but that if it had the same kind of restrictions that the hotel meals tax had, where it had to be used on capital only, at least that's a taxpayer savings down the road.
Exactly right. Yep.
So I think if it would just be rolling from one project to another and paying for it would be a good way to go.
And I think that's what we should do, is use it strictly for capital items only.
So I think from my other hat as the chairman of the building committee, so my opinion solely is that the DPW garage, which is probably a $3.5 to $5 million project, is a critical need for the town because it's what keeps us operational. And they maintain all of our equipment, across the town, which, not only for their own departments, but for schools and police and fire and stuff like that. I mean, fire does a lot of its own. But, they don't have the right facilities at this point in time. They need to be addressed. The movement on the laundry building to take it down puts us in a good position for a joint, recreation center with an elderly combination type of thing. It's a beautiful piece of land. It's a great location as to how it attaches to fields and stuff like that. And we own the land already. So the investment in taking that building down gets you one step closer to that project and kind of moves you along. So I would say that's kind of happening at the same time as the DPW process is moving forward. Obviously, then the building of that facility, which is a bigger scope thing, and the design has to be worked out, would be right after that. The treatment plants and stuff like that, there are different options, whether it ends up being a water sewer type thing or whether it ends up being a grant funding. That's going to have to move on its own cycle. It doesn't really matter what we do with any other building, that whatever the dictates from the state are what the dictates are, and it's going to go from there. So, and the other fire station, again, I think there's, interest in that, but I think we've got a few on the plate right now that need to kind of get addressed. And again, if we can't address our own equipment, we've got some issues going forward.
And I also think, too, that some of those things can be tied to growth in the north end of town with some of the new construction up on Route 1 that could perhaps help offset some of that cost, which we think. Because if there's going to be more growth in that end of town, it's going to put more pressure on the call system itself to respond to that area versus the other areas of town. So we're going to need assistance if that happens. Yep. So that's just the reality of the situation. So I think, but that hasn't happened yet. So but as soon as it does, we will certainly have to keep that in mind as a component of that discussion. But I think the community center, I'm not dismissing the DPW. I completely agree. I think virtually everybody here on the committee has mentioned that at one point or another, that DPW really needs to get done first because it's an existing facility and needs to be upgraded. And Chris has talked about it for years. It does need to get done. But I think if the fact that we have a potential funding source for that could actually help that. Yeah. But I think we also have money in here for a study for that, if I'm not mistaken, which is included. So we are taking the step for that already. So that's not dismissing that at all. I just want everybody to be clear on that point. But the other one is the community setup piece of it, and then what would be the first step would be to take down a laundry building, get that done. And then what about a study of that site? What would be the next step for that?
Well, I think next is once the agreement is on the site, I know there's a couple sites that they've been looking at, but again, I think from the building committee's point of view, that's the better site from its topography. It's a flat site. Yep. The auditorium, which is obviously owned by the town as well, there's going to be significant site work necessary to get that to be something that, again, if you're building for both a senior center and a recreation center, accessibility has got to be the key thing. So a flat site is about the best site you can possibly get. Exactly. And that site that the laundry building on is pretty good size.
And plus there's parking close to it too.
Yes, there's parking. So, and we could make more parking because obviously the size of the site. So I think really getting that down, which is going to take some time, because there's a lot of asbestos abatement that has to be done, that's in there. We're estimating that it could be $750,000 to $1 million just in asbestos. Not $750,000, I mean, $100,000. Just in asbestos abatement,
right.
because of all the piping underground was wrapped. So you're probably looking at a project that's close to $150,000 by the time it's done to get the site cleared. But again, that's the cheapest $100,000 lot you're going to buy in this town, if you will.
So we already have a grant for $50,000 for that from the state. The state's given us some money for that. We're trying to match it with the other $100,000.
Right.
And so that's going to be something that we talk about as far as potentially using ARPA funds as well. So
And then it would fall back to the actual design of the building. Again, just like we would do on a school building, you design the building for the site, and you then get cost estimates on it, and then you can move forward to the town with what it's actually going to cost to do it. So kind of a three-step process, but getting the site, to me, is number one in the whole process, because at least then taxpayers know you're serious about what you're doing. So.
And then the question is, if the community feels serious about moving forward, the next question would be, do you want to fund the study to do it? And if that's the case, that'd be the next logical step. Okay.
Now, which, the study to build one?
To build.
Didn't we already do
I thought they already did a study.
We selected a study, that was a study to look at sites and
Oh.
determine that, yeah, and that was a short money thing, so there was a feasibility study, and the feasibility study confirmed that there's a need, and there's also the fact that we needed to have locations, and the focus of the study site selection was to look primarily on town-owned sites, so that, because obviously we would have to spend more money to acquire a new site if we had to do that. So I do think that piece of it is done. The next piece is design process.
The design phase.
Is design phase. And then we get to that point, that's where the money meets the road, and people would have to step up and say, okay, here we go.
And typically, just so you have a kind of a ballpark idea, the design of a building typically ends up being about 10 to 12% of the cost of the building, to have an architect that, for the full scope, not just for the initial design is the cheaper portion of it.
Yeah.
When they go to the bid documents and then follow up on managing the whole process and stuff like that, they earn their money through the whole project, but they invest most of their money up front into the design. So
the initial estimate for this project was about $11 million for this project. So you're probably looking at 15 by the time we're ready, I would think.
So you're looking at, a little over $1 million, $1 million to $1.5 million in design, engineering, and control of the project. I will say, the town has done extremely well with KBA, which happens to be right in the back door.
Literally,
where this project is
behind
gonna
it,
be.
where they're located,
And we obviously have abilities to hire engineers and architects differently as far as the bidding process, but they have been phenomenal for us, and they have really
done a good
protected
job.
us
They've
on
really
every
done a good
project
job.
we've used them on, so they would be my recommendation
Yeah.
in this
And I
process.
thought, I read in the report, when that study came, I thought it was 14 million, but they.
No,
Well, at this point, Steph, it's.
that was
Yeah.
probably,
It's not gonna be a real
It's not even
number
worth
anyhow.
asking for a number, because you don't even know
Yeah.
what you're looking at.
yeah,
yet,
I think that was what you probably saw was that it's
Yeah.
11, but it could be as high as 14 at that time, by the time we get to it.
Yeah.
So that's why I was saying $15 million.
Depending on the scope of the building, depending on what they're trying to get into it.
Right.
Is it a one-story, two-story, what is it? That's really gonna dictate the pricing here, so.
I think also, too, we have to be very mindful of where you end up with the tailor
Yes.
as well.
Right.
I mean, if you're thinking that might be 3 or 4 years away, so, but now you're taking on two pretty big never mind the DPW, that's a smaller project that does need to be done,
But
but,
if you look at it, again, I'm not an expert on the item, and I don't want to act like we're pre-spending money, but if you do something like the sign, and it creates a pretty good revenue stream, again, remember, most of these projects are paid for over 20 years, so
Right.
one revenue
You can
stream
offset
could
that
handle
cost.
more than
Yeah.
one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And especially if you're not going back to the taxpayers on it. In other words, if they've gotten an advantage like we did with the meals tax, where we're paying our OPEB liability down, we're paying for our road work and stuff like that.
I would
To
even
me, that's a
argue,
win-win for the taxpayer.
I mean,
Yeah.
the topic of marijuana is coming back as well, and it's another potential area where you could use that.
Just
start-
dedicate the
fo-
money
dedicate
towards those
towards-
types of
Yeah, market first.
Doesn't
Yeah,
go to a
market for
budget,
capital
it goes to
projects.
basically upgrading the town
Yeah.
facilities.
And this time around, we have to get it all in writing, and there's so many,
Oh, my
I
God.
heard the other night, Jack thinks it was supposed to be
This,
50/50.
It actually isn't writing, though. It is, it's a selectman's policy,
Well,
so.
it is, but I think there's some question on, the selectmen signed, that that's where it has to be used, but then I think some people, everyone is
I think there
remembering
was
that
discussion
meeting
about it, yeah.
differently. Like, I
Well,
know the other
yeah.
night Jack brought it up again, he thinks it was supposed to be 50% OPED and 50%.
No, it
I
wasn't.
remember it as just a general statement,
That's right,
that
yeah.
it's gonna be used for these two.
I think-
I actually
think-
remember it the other way around. I remember that it was OPEB first,
Yeah.
and what was left over was basically to be used for road work.
And that's
That's
exactly
what I
that's
thought,
exactly
yeah.
how we've done it, too, by the way.
Because the schedule, we knew what the schedule was to manage OPEB.
Right.
And at the beginning, we couldn't even fund the full OPEB liability.
Yeah.
It was as it built up that we were able to fund
I
it.
think what happened is that the confusion was created because the selectmen had talked about it during their meetings, that, that potentially it could go, maybe half for each, that type of thing. But ultimately, the selectmen never voted it that way. They created a policy that said, you can only use it on these two items. They didn't talk about 50% or any percentage at all.
Yeah,
All right?
yeah.
And I have that in writing, so that's,
Yeah,
that's clear, that's clear.
I saw that too, but I saw Jack bring it up again the other night, and I said,
He won't let it go. It's a-
Oh, don't worry, we're talking about it again.
Yeah, yeah, he won't let that one go. So, and it's fine, but we do have the documents to reflect that, so. So anyway, so let's move on. We'll, but I just wanted to at least get those items out there so that, and get your thoughts on that, so that we can, because I know that the seniors are looking to discuss that as well, and as well as the community center advocates want to know more what the steps are. So thank you.
Does Mark have anything to say on that?
So yeah, good thought. Mark,
He's on.
Mark's on the call right now. But do you have anything? Just while we're on this topic, and then we'll just jump over to police right after this. But real quickly.
Yeah, Bill said it perfectly. I mean, the 10 to 12% of the overall cost. The estimators did say, between 12 to 13 million using last June's numbers, but things are going to go up as we move forward. And I think it's worth noting, Bill, you mentioned at the selectmen's meeting last week that bond schedule, that 2024, 2025 going down in the bond schedule, figuring out where the Taylor fits in. And Bill has said in the past is that 4 or 5 years before the school building commissions allow that to go back. Can you fit something in between? I think that you've kind of all discussed that before.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much. All right, have a great rest of your day. All right, Police Department, Chief Grace. We're running a few minutes behind here, but I apologize for that.
My goal is to make up time for it.
There you go.
How's that?
So
Morning.
Good morning. So the chief is, you have a couple items on here. One is the body cameras.
That's the only one.
Okay. I thought you had something else. I'm thinking of fire as two.
No, just one item is the body camera project for the police department. Last year I was here, did a presentation. I believe the board voted for it but didn't fund it.
Yeah.
Things have changed slightly. Number one, the cost. All those quotes have been gone
Yeah.
with policing. So, and that model under the police reform was no longer valid either, because the initial proposal was just for the full-time police officers.
Yeah.
In regards to police reform, every officer, whether they're a full-time or a reserve officer, which that status is gone now, has to be trained to the same level. So every reserve officer working will have to wear a camera as well. We can't kind of pick and choose who has it and who doesn't. So, WatchGuard, which is owned by Motorola, which is, these are all on the state bid list. This is the one the state police, every state trooper is wearing today. The technology is proven. They've had great success with it. And there was 2 models to go with. There was the build your own infrastructure, buy your own equipment, pay the licensing fee per year, which has gone up astronomically, and then your in charge of all of the, not just the amount of data, and as you expand, you have to keep upgrading it. And I can tell you, the amount of technology requirements for the police department, the last 5 years, what we've asked Aaron and his team to do has been, it's been massive. And without their support, we wouldn't even function. So many of the communities, or you have the cloud option. The cloud options is in which WatchGuard, they house all of your data. They protect it. They also build in all of the software capabilities. They have the evidence storage option, which allows outside vendors to access the footage at our request. And that example is clearly shown through our cases that will go to court. One of the biggest concerns right now is the trial courts are essentially 3 years behind. So every one of these incidents where there was body camera footage, you have to contain that and hold it. So I don't foresee us in the next 3 or 4 years catching up. Plus the civil issues, so we would be looking at a minimum of a 3-year retainment on any video footage on certain cases. The district attorney's office, when I met with Mike Morrissey, he doesn't have the capability to house our footage. We can't say, here's our footage, we're gonna send it over electronically, you store it for the discovery. They're incapable, they don't have a system in place. So what happens is we create the file, we allow them access into the system, and then the district attorneys or the ADAs get a code and they can directly access the footage that they need to satisfy the court's requirements. The cloud system also is essentially like it's kind of like your cell phone. You buy a cell phone, you pay so much a month, and what they do is they guarantee the equipment, they guarantee the storage, they guarantee the replacement, and they guarantee the technology updates. These cameras require a 3-year update. That's what all the companies are saying. In 3 years, the technology that you have today, you have to start upgrading. So that's, on this proposal, this is $196,000. This is essentially a 5-year cost analysis for body cameras for the police department, which comes out to about $39,000 a year. If we buy our own, we pay more because we end up at about $125,000 just to buy the cameras, just to buy the infrastructure. That's not even including all the time that the staff at the IT department is gonna have to help us with maintaining this. And then we're gonna get charged $18,000 a year for licensing to maintain it. So the goal is, I'm asking this committee to fund the 196, which will give us 5 years. I reached out to, George, you asked me, I got it from the attorneys about our data. If we move to a different product, and they sent all the language, our data is our data. They don't like retain it on us or hold it for us. And secondly, in 5 years, the market will be way more competitive. I think as the state rolls out more and more of these grants, more departments, this is going to become common practice.
That's my question for you, Chief. Is there any grants available for this at this point? I mean,
So
there were. I know there were originally.
Yep, so in the first round of the body camera grants,
Yeah.
which was highly competitive, we received $105,000. We were a winner in the first round. The state did not, we asked for more, they only gave us 105, but the state would not allow any of the grant to be used for data storage, because they just don't know how that works. So out of $105,000, we can use 80,000 of that towards the 196.
Okay.
But there's a catch to that, and what I ask the committee is to fund the 196, because when the grant was put out, there is a stipulation. 1, you only have it for 6 months, and 2, the Executive Office of Public Safety put a requirement in there that the union has to agree to it. We are in contract negotiations right now, we are working on this, but in 6 months, if we don't have a deal, the grant's gone. So if the CI, this project isn't like we can get by with some of it. It's all or none. The CIP is either gonna fund it or you're not gonna fund it. If you fund and cut it by 60,000, it just doesn't work. I can't send half the patrol officers out with body cameras in the other half.
So I think that this is, again, this falls into that unique category of issues. Like, I think what we're really gonna look at this is really a two-phase approach this morning as compared to other years, because I think essentially what we want to do is identify the items that we think are worthy of funding, and then we'll talk about the funding piece afterwards, because you potentially have $80,000 as an offset against costs here if you're able to successfully get that done, which means that we would only really need to fund about 120 of that cost here. So, but the good news, doesn't need to go to town meeting for that, because if we use ARPA funds to do that, we could essentially do that as soon as you get approval from the with the union on that.
Well, it isn't a standalone item with the union.
Understood.
Because it's an open contract season.
Right.
It's-
But I think, but even if the selectmen, or if the selectmen reach agreement with, ultimately, in our office and you ultimately agree on a contract and the selectmen agree to that, we could essentially go forward from that point, even though, because the contract goes to town meeting for the funding only, really, that's the issue. All right, so so the funding piece would be a different issue, because the funding for this would come out of ARPA funds, which is available now. It's available today, or by June, I think will be the latest that we'll see that, depending upon how much the whole amount will be available. So I think what I'm saying to you, Chief, is that if everybody agrees that this is something we want to go forward with, that's one thing. The funding piece, is something we still to be determined. We still have to figure that out.
You could always cap it and say
Yeah,
up to.
up to.
And then if he comes in with a bigger grant.
And it wouldn't need to go to town meeting for approval, for that matter.
Yeah, and if we got the grant, then the CIP money just goes back. It's unspent, it's.
That's what I was just gonna ask you,
Yes.
Chief. So if we fund the 196, and so you're gonna be able to do it regardless, because the funding's
Right.
there.
Yes.
Well, can you go ahead with this, if we fund it through the CIP, can you?
No, I'm
You
still.
can't make your offices do it.
I'm still
You have
obligated
stuff to wait.
by
still
law
Yeah,
through
to-
negotiations.
Okay, but and if everything,
Regardless, yeah,
if everything
regardless.
goes well,
Yeah.
you might be able to put that 105 or part of that 105 towards it. If everything plays out well.
The 80,000 could go towards that.
yeah.
If everything plays out well.
We can apply the grant and then that
Best case
excess.
scenario,
gets
and then
turned
that
back
money
to the
just goes
town.
back.
So a 196 project turns into about a 106, or 116 rather, 116.
You're not even moving it at that, because
Exactly.
you're doing it on the time, unlike town meeting where you're putting the money in. If you're taking it from the ARPA funds, it's just, at the time, how much were we gonna take? Well, you could take up to X, but I'm only gonna take 120 instead of 180 or whatever it is.
Right. Okay.
So does that mean police details would all need the body cameras as well?
Correct.
Yep, okay, this is kind of a question for Aaron, I guess. The cloud storage, sounds like we have everything wrapped up for that, legal-wise. It seems like everything's going to cloud nowadays anyway, you don't really have a choice. Is that something we're moving to with just about everything, or is that specific to this?
So,
Because
yes.
just, again, from my work, going to the cloud, the costs are different.
Yep.
Not that they're higher or lower, they're just different.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this in terms of it's the perpetual model where you own it, and there's a capital outlay versus software for a service. So we're talking about buying a storage infrastructure and implementing it versus kind of leasing or renting, right?
Right.
So there's obviously, advantages to both models. We often do a cost business, analysis in terms of where do we get a better value. On the school side, for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been in the process of moving to the cloud. In terms of both perpetual licensing and software as a service, the schools are eligible for educational licensing discounts that are very, very aggressive and substantial. So, in many cases, the schools are paying like cents on the dollar like, 3 cents on the dollar to what the town would pay. So the schools have been moving to Office 365, SharePoint, and OneDrive.
Yep.
And probably within the next 12 months, we'll have moved a lot of our, flat file user data into the cloud. So with that said, there's still other infrastructure costs. There's cloud-to-cloud backup or cloud-to-prem backup scenarios, so that's a different type of infrastructure.
Is for
Then
the
we'll-
body cams, is that
Yeah.
all covered in this? Or
Yeah,
is
so-
that eventually something we're gonna have to eventually
Yeah, so
spend
essentially
a lot
what
of
the
money on?
chief is proposing is essentially a body cam as a service program, where they're providing the camera, they're providing the maintenance, the, software maintenance support, upgrades, technical support, and the storage infrastructure.
Got it.
So the infrastructure it's still, the forward-facing infrastructure is still managed by the police department in terms of, cataloging video evidence or,
Public
responding to
requests,
public records requests,
redaction,
redaction work, stuff like that. They're still doing that work. But it's essentially a software as a service proposal. The other piece is, too, is a lot of times we're able to leverage existing assets. We talk about the joint data center.
Yep.
The type of storage which you're talking about for long-term archival of, video is not the same type of infrastructure which we use for kind of production data hosting. The cost of our storage is actually much higher.
Yeah.
Right, so this is like set it and forget it, right? You're just
Beautiful.
putting it off there, and then when you need it, you don't need, high performance or anything like that to get it off. It's sheer volume. So there's not a lot of assets to leverage in terms of this. If we were to pursue this and do this with an on-prem infrastructure, we would be building a storage system just for this. It's a little difficult, right, to project. There's some data that's available based on other body cam programs. But as the chief explained in terms of the backup of the courts, typically the way it works now is we export data in a format which is admissible to court, and then there's a chain of custody with evidence, and that's turned over to the DA.
Okay.
So they're at this time, they're saying they don't have the capacity to take and store, they don't have a system to take and store this type of data. So they're asking the local PDs to retain it. So with that, you're talking long retention times in general, right? And still needing to get legal opinions in terms of public records retention and all of that piece is so, I support.
Yeah, we're kind of pigeonholed into doing that anyway.
Yeah,
It's kind of what
I
I'm
support it.
hearing,
And then as the chief said, that, just about with all of the agreements we enter with the software, whether it's software as a service, whether it's with Microsoft Cloud or Azure, the data is always our data. Now, there are often costs involved with the transfer of the data or the extraction of the data from systems. So, it's not just like picking up your files and walking away and bringing out a new system. So there's getting the files out. So often, if we were to discontinue a body cam program and say that we're not gonna go to another program, right, we'd have to find a way to get that data out and have a place to store it.
yeah.
And then also have a place to retrieve it. So it's one thing to have the data, but then also have it in a retrievable format that you can still use it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
often if you switch platforms, the new platform will take that data, as we've seen, working with other vendors or on other projects that are similar. They'll help you take that data and bring it into their system and continue to host that data for you.
Awesome. Last question, what about Gillette?
In regards to,
Body cams, do you make other departments that'll be up there wear body cams? Do
So,
they not need it because
without-
it's private
with each
property?
so each department, some departments have already moved to body cameras.
Yeah.
So, I allow them to bring it in, that's their policies. So
Okay.
they have their cameras.
So
All-
if Walpole had body cameras and they were working up at Gillette, they would
Even
wear,
if
they
we
would wear
didn't
'em.
have them, they would wear theirs.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right, okay, yeah,
Correct.
okay.
So we're
We
going to,
wouldn't necessarily store their data on our system, right?
well,
Would we?
they're working for us. So again,
Exactly,
we're just so unique in regards to potentially how much data one Gillette event could create.
Correct.
Right, and I mean, we were talking at the last AdCom meeting, you know, if this is something that we think we need for all Gillette events, this might be something we want to reach out to the craft group about, like, hey, this is an added cost for all of us.
Right.
You know, if we're gonna require to keep all this, that's a lot of data. It's a lot of
Well, the
officers
question-
up there, it's a lot of data to store. And if there's costs associated with that, then we have to say, hey, like, if this is what we're bound to do, we need some help making sure that we can enforce that.
I think we'll be, you see, the challenge with that is the fact that, is it a requirement to have the camera? And the answer today is no. However, if that is in fact the policy of the town, then the question's gonna come back, they're gonna come back and say, look, that's your policy. That's not our policy. Follow me? So they could easily come back and push back on that. Not to say that it's not a valid concern, a valid question about the funding. The issue's gonna be, you know, what obligation are they under to help pay for that, under those conditions?
Yeah,
You follow me?
yeah, I follow you.
But it could be a good discussion because.
I agree, I agree. I agree.
They would possibly have a benefit.
Well, there is a benefit.
For them as well.
There is a benefit.
If
There
there is
is.
an incident
You're
up
absolutely
there,
right, Steph. You're absolutely right.
that might open them to a lawsuit.
Right, yeah.
The fact that there would be some data, I mean, so, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Bill. They may not be forced to, but it would be a great
there is a
conversation.
there's a
For
beneficial
the chief
trade-off,
and
yeah.
possibly you, if, you know, if this all pans through, to maybe have with them and say, hey, listen, you know, there's a benefit to you too, and maybe work out
Yeah,
something,
that's right.
you know.
Fair enough. That's the kind of conversation we have to have. It's never that quite that
It's
easy.
just,
You know, like,
it's,
yeah.
we just don't.
Funds are never a good
that's-
conversation.
It's not like we're the city of Seattle,
Yeah.
where we have hundreds of Seattle police officers, and it's one,
Right.
Just one agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
it's
get it.
so
I get it,
dynamic.
yep.
It's a fair
And it's
point, though, Dan.
ever-changing.
I appreciate the point.
I would assume if
Absolutely.
there's incidents and other departments have that data, if they, for example, if they're in the cloud storage, then they send us the link. We have access to that data, and they just keep it in their system.
Right, that would be great,
So,
right.
just like if the courts need something, what happens is we create the file for the evidence for the discovery. And we're actually able to send the link with all the information to the district attorneys in an email. They log on to the cloud directly. They don't have to log into our network.
Right.
Well, if you had an event at Gillette, you wouldn't allow them to store the data from that event there, right? You would maintain it, you'd
Who,
maintain.
Gillette?
Yeah.
No.
You'd
They have not-
maintain, yeah, you'd maintain the data.
No,
right.
they have, no.
This is strictly a police matter.
Yeah, no, this is all
Okay, great.
through WatchGuard.
Any other questions from the committee on this item? I think you've made your point here,
Okay.
Chief, and I think you've
Thank you.
done a good job of explaining. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to Fire and Joint Public Safety Building. Chief Kelleher.
Thank you, good morning.
Morning.
First of all, I'm glad to see you survived from last night.
I survived. Barely.
One of his captains retired from the department last night, so I stopped by, but I left early. You were there, I'm sure, for quite longer than I was, so.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good for you. I'm glad it was a good, nice event. Thanks.
Yeah, it was nice, it was real nice. So basically today, just the ceiling and repair of the concrete floor and the apparatus floor at this fire station. I think this is the second or third time we've been in front of the committee on this. You know, as time goes on, it just gets further and further in disrepair, so, you know, like, the cost is gonna continue to go up. This is one of those projects that if we don't do it, we're gonna be back here next year, so. I think this is a good project to kind of take on right now, and we really don't have anything else, so.
All right, you've got we've got two items here, with the uninterruptible power supply.
Yeah, so the uninterruptible power supply, so there's a uninterruptible power supply that provides backup battery power in the building. When the building was built, this system was designed to provide battery power primarily to the dispatch area, and then also to other areas in the buildings that provide critical public safety operations and life safety equipment. This system here, it's, there's a couple different phases in terms of obsolescence. So there's commercialization, which is the product's no longer being sold, but there's still spare parts and service available for it. Then there's spare parts available, which means that commercialized support isn't available and parts aren't provided necessarily by guaranteed by the manufacturer, but there is still spare parts available. This could be from decommissioned, systems or the secondary market. And then there's obsolescence. And this machine went into obsolescence in 2018. In terms of the maintenance, we've tried to keep the maintenance up on this unit. We have had some problems with it recently. In terms of scheduled maintenance, that's late or past due because we're not able to get the parts to do it. There's 8 DC capacitors that need to be replaced, 3 AC capacitors on the input side, 3 on the output side, and even the fan units are late in terms of maintenance. We did replace all the battery capacity that we had several years ago. Actually, we started to have batteries that were exploding. They were overcharging, they were exploding.
Not a good thing.
No, not a good thing.
Especially in the fire department.
In the fire department,
Never
yep.
goes well.
So we did replace 60 battery units. So these are very large, deep cycle batteries. So those 60 batteries were replaced, but they're due to be replaced again in 2023. The estimated cost of replacement on the batteries alone is upwards of $12,000. At the time, it was around $9,000 when we last replaced them. I think it was between 4 and 5 years ago at this point.
Was this unit installed when the public safety building was built?
Yeah, so when the building was built, so what,
2007.
2007?
Yeah.
Okay,
15 years ago now. Hard to
Yeah,
believe.
so again, as Mr. Yukna mentioned earlier, as also Mr. Keegan, that, we go into these projects and then we try to get as much time as we can out of them, and sometimes, we're exceeding the life cycle by double. And this is, I think, a pretty good example of that. We did,
Just a question about this, though, because the building is on generators, so how often do you actually use the backups?
yeah, so this has actually been a topic of conversation a couple times. So we did bring this forth last year, but we did hold off on it in terms of, and also the previous year, held off on it in terms of looking at how the regionalization of the dispatch would maybe impact what was needed in terms of this particular system. So the system that's there now was designed actually with a runtime of upwards of 4 hours, which is, I think, excessive. But that's how it was designed, and there is a generator, a diesel generator backup, right?
Yeah.
So typically, these systems, there's a switch over time, with the diesel generator. There's a warm-up cycle, right? The generator needs to first be triggered to start. That's by a transfer switch. It starts, it has a warm-up cycle, and then the building will cut over. So, typical switchover time is probably somewhere between 8 and 25 to 30 minutes that this system would hold equipment up for the generator. I think what we've experienced in the past, though, is we've had times where the generator has not gotten up in that 22-minute or 30-minute time period, and we have had extended periods, outages, where this system has run almost to the 4-hour maximum, while the generator was either being serviced or other work was being done. So in this case, the replacement system, we did some load calculations based on the current anticipated load. We have identified that in a number of cases that with the original installation of the system, that there's outlets in the building on the fire side, the police side as well, where there's either mission-critical operational equipment or life safety equipment that we want to bring onto the system. So we did the load calculations, and we're able to kind of make some adjustments to the capacity, both to the size and the capacity of the system. This system has a rating of 90 minutes versus the 4-hour rating. And there's some adjustments made in terms of the capacity in terms of the system itself, because of the reduction in equipment in terms of dispatch. So, again, this is, this item is far outside of, a serviceable, in terms of its serviceable life. We do keep a maintenance agreement on it. It's a year-to-year agreement because it depends on, the provider being able to provide the parts, or to provide even people that are skilled to work on it, because it's become so old that finding technicians that have the experience to work on it's become difficult. There's like one or two, I think, technicians that we've had to have dispatched out of Maine, or like the last two in New England, that support it. So at this point, the agreement that they're extending to us is a battery maintenance agreement only. It's which they'll come out, they'll inspect the batteries. They do inspect and kind of do some PM on the UPS itself. But if we were to have an outage requiring parts, it's really likely that they would not be able to source the parts for us at this point. And we've had 2 or 3 events with this equipment in the last 10 months, where we had to go to bypass on it. It always seems that we need this equipment too. We always have trouble with it, right? The day before high winds, the day before a blizzard, right? So it's definitely something that we'd like to move forward with and get replaced.
Is this purchase, install, and balance another loads? Is that a full in cost, or is that just equipment?
Yeah, that's full in cost.
Okay.
So, this would be it's a full rip and replace of the removal and disposal of the old equipment, so the batteries and things like
Yep.
that, some of that is considered hazardous waste.
Yes, it is.
So it's the removal of all the old equipment. The old equipment is very large. It's about the size of 4 refrigerators, 4 full-size refrigerators.
Wow.
How big's the new one?
What's that?
1 refrigerator?
About the size of a mini fridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything gets smaller.
Yeah.
It's about the size of that podium,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
So it's about the size of the podium. So that equipment, needs to be removed. Obviously, too, a lot of that equipment had been brought into the room before the construction was done on the
Built
building.
around it? Yeah.
Some of the building was built around it, so it needs to be disassembled quite a bit to even get it out, and they're gonna require rigging and things like that to actually get.
Aaron, can I
get
just-
some of it out, yeah.
So, in simple terms, is when you're at your house and your power blinks, without this system, everything in the PD goes down.
Shuts off, yeah.
Everything. So if we have custodies, we just lost all our cameras. Our radios, which are all tied into the power of the building, which are repeaters, we lose our communications. So if that transfer isn't smooth, then everything shuts down. And honestly, there's a good chance Aaron's getting a phone call at home because, so how many servers are we running in the
Usually 3
building?
morning.
Yeah, how many, plus we're actually housing
Yeah, we have the data center
servers
upstairs.
for the
too.
town in the PD.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
can I
those
ask
all
a
go
question
down.
on that? So we talked about the synchronous systems in the high school. High school has a UPS as
Yeah.
well. And I did see a generator on here for the high
Yeah, we have a
school at some
generator
point.
too, yeah.
Yeah, do we have a replacement somewhere on?
So we actually have a separate generator from the high school generator, so the data,
Got it.
the data center at the high school is a gas-fired generator.
Beautiful.
So, and that's fairly new, it's probably 2015, 2014.
Okay.
That unit was put in, and that's actually separate from the diesel-fired generator that they use at the high school.
Cool. Thanks.
So,
And then Aaron, all the maintenance, the agreements and stuff, that's all budgeted yearly, right? This is all you have to do this is just a replacement of the.
yeah, it's a replacement of
Yes.
equipment. I do believe it
Have
includes.
a warranty a couple of years?
Yeah,
something
I
like
do believe it includes 3 years of maintenance. And this piece of equipment actually, in terms of where it is, it's just recently, it's a really recent piece of equipment in terms of commercialization. And, I anticipate it will be commercialized still for probably 8+ years. So a lot of times, with this equipment too, it's a modular piece of equipment, so it can be upgraded modularly, similar to what we have at the high school. So you have a chassis, And then as they upgrade the modules, you just slide them on the chassis, you put them in, and eventually those chassis do become obsolete, right, as they upgrade the modules, but it should give, quite a long service life, to the building. And then again, too, there's the money is for the removal, the hardware replacement, any upgrades to the equipment to integrate it, into the existing system, and then also some money to address some of the deficiencies, like some of the equipment, outlets and things that are over on both the fire and the police side that need to be on this system that are not on this system, so.
Okay. Very good. Going back to the floor, Chief, just talk a little bit about what that will do. So that's an epoxy type sealant?
Yeah, so initially, when they originally built the building, it was in the budget to have that done. It was value engineered out back then.
Yeah.
And every fire station in every town surrounding us that has been built in the last 15 years has that. And as a result, ours didn't have it, and things getting underneath the concrete, now it's spalling, so it's creating like divots in the apparatus floor.
Right.
So I'd like to just correct that.
Sure.
So the cost in the request was to repair and then seal the floor, so to prevent it from happening further.
So there is the question was raised to me, and I think it was Bill Euchner actually said it to me. So is there it's a seal, are you gonna seal it, or then you're gonna put an epoxy on top of it? Because the weight of those vehicles, especially in the summertime, can really damage that epoxy sealant if you're doing an epoxy cover on it. So it's one thing to seal it, which I agree with, but the epoxy, I just question whether or not that's the right use for that, or right application in that situation.
Yeah, the actual, I'm not like intimately familiar with the process, but it's in every building. It's in Sharon, it's in Walpole, it's in Mansfield, it's in Rentham, it's in Plainville. They all, it's a standard. It's really the standard.
And the maintenance on that has not been an issue for them?
No.
Don't think you know?
No.
I think it's pretty durable. I think too, when you apply it, when the concrete is new, right, the adhesion is good, so I think it's.
I think they have to actually grind it.
Grind it down to get adhesion.
Get adhesion to it, that's right, yeah. It'll, and that's an interesting process. I've seen that done before, and it can be really messy.
Yeah.
If you're not careful.
I'm not looking forward to trying to figure out.
So you want it, but you're like, oh no.
Oh yeah, because it's going to be the right. We can't have everything outside in the dead of summer.
You're going to bring everything outside.
Yeah.
You can't, because when you do that,
it's going to be like
stuff can splatter all over the place.
Yeah, it's going to be late September or like late May, because we can't have the ambulances sitting outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like in the heat. We obviously can't have the fire trucks outside in the winter, so.
Yeah, that's right.
So that'll be a challenge.
Other questions, comments from the committee on that? Okay, I think you're all set.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome to stay if you want, but we're going to just get into the discussion of that in a short time. I'm going to hit all the DPWs first. It's going to take a good few minutes for that one. I'm not sure you have to do that. And Chief, I know you've been struggling a little bit with your back, so I don't think you want to sit in that chair much longer than this. So, all right. So thank you. All right. We'll go now to Public Works, and so I know that Chris is going to have Lance and Bob speak on this, but I'm sure you'll jump in too at some point. But who wants to start?
Yeah. So we're gonna let Lance start. Anybody who doesn't know, Lance is the town engineer, and then Bob Worthley is on as well, is the water superintendent. So they're gonna go through the items. I'll chime in as needed, but they should have it covered.
Okay, great, thank you.
Nice to see everyone. Beautiful Saturday, so I'll try not to take too long on this. But just gonna run through the FY23 capital list I have in front of me here, starting with the street sweeper. This is the fourth payment of a 5-year rent-to-own lease agreement. So nothing new or surprising there if you guys remember from the previous years. So next year will be our last payment, and then we'll be able to take that off the list. So any questions on that?
Nope.
Nope. All right. So the next thing I have on the list is the DPW facility master plan in addition. We've asked for $150,000 for that. That includes an estimated 50 to 60 for the plan, and then about 100,000 or so for potential immediate repairs, such as maybe hopefully addressing some roof leaks, repointing of the building where stone blocks are coming out, maybe some other minor repairs such as putting on roof leaders on the downspouts that are causing additional erosion that have fallen off over the years. There's been some discussion on this in the meeting already, so I won't get into too much. Obviously, it sounds like you guys are in favor of this, which I'm thankful for. I do think it's, a long time coming. I just will say, obviously, this is important in terms of determining what the actual needs are and what the cost is going to be. We talked about funding through the installation of the sign over on the site there, which is definitely going to help. But in terms of the true cost of the renovation, we'll have a much better idea once we go through this process. Does anyone have any particular questions on this?
So Lance or Chris, I'm not sure who's the best one for this. How old is that building, and when was the last time any kind of major investment was made in it?
Chris, do you want to jump in? You probably have more information.
Sure. So that building was built prior to Dave Laliberty starting. So as most people know, Dave put in 49 years, almost 50.
Yeah.
And I would say that was the last time anything major was done, was when it was built. Unfortunately, the building probably close to 10 years ago now had solar panels put on the roof, which has just caused leaks throughout the building. The solar panels have caught on fire 2 different times since they've been installed. My opinion is they should just be removed as part of this process, and the roof will need to be redone. It's a flat roof, so it's just a rubber roofing, but it does leak in various locations. So it really hasn't had much done since it was built originally.
So I was not here when those were installed, but I will tell you that normally they don't recommend putting solar panels on old roofs. They usually recommend it when they put on a new roof, and that they put it in such a way so that it doesn't damage the roof in that process. So apparently you struck on 2 ends. It was put on an old roof, and it was probably damaged when they did it. So and the old technology 10 years ago is not nearly as good as the new technology that they're using now for solar panels, which is a much better product that's out there.
Doesn't sometimes, if you put them on a new roof, doesn't protect the roof a little bit too?
To some degree,
I've heard
yeah.
that before. I don't know if that's true or not.
Some of that's true. I'm not an expert in that area, but I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
I've heard that comment as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyways.
After the second fire, which was probably about a year ago now, the fire department building inspection came in. They were shut off, and we have chose not to repair them at this time. So we're not using them at this point anyway.
Okay.
And Chris, you wouldn't be interested at putting them on a new building? You want no part of those solar panels?
I think with the 2 solar fields we have in Foxborough, I don't see a reason to install one on that building in particular.
Chris, what do those solar panels do? They just heat that building, or they light up that building?
It was just to supplement the power in that building.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions from the committee so far? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the replace the rollaway lifts.
All right. So the rollaway lifts, those are used to lift up larger vehicles, which include the school buses and the dump trucks. The existing lifts are very old, about 29 years old. And with our last annual inspection, they said you're probably not going to get another year out of them. So it would obviously be a big hit operationally to the whole town if we were to lose these. We wouldn't be able to do any underside work of the buses or anything else. So in terms of safety to the driver, safety to our equipment maintenance guys, it's an important piece to have replaced. Any questions on that?
Okay. All right. Moving on to the 2 6-wheel dumps.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys have an updated version of the
It's the
list here. Last version showed 410.
Yeah,
Has that been changed?
That's the new. That's
Okay,
the new
so now
version,
it should.
410, right? It says 410.
No,
right?
the current number's actually gone. Yeah, okay, so that's gone up. With our recent quotes, I think we extended that information to, George's office, and Marie. So it looks like those have gone up significantly. So really, we're looking at is closer to 543 for the two, six-wheel dump trucks at this point. It has to do, with the limitation on, access to these vehicles in the market. It's gone up, significantly. These are obviously critical needs as well, like everything else we've talked about. They're replacing a 2000 and a 2006 dump truck. It's also part of us trying to meet our stormwater requirements. One of the big things we're trying to do here is reduce our salt usage. We spend a lot of money on salt, and it's not a great thing for the environment. So having these controls that are going to come with these vehicles will allow us to reduce our salt usage, will improve environmental impacts on streams and everything else, and give us more control that as the guys are going throughout the town, it'll regulate salt usage. So
Lance, just to be clear,
Yep.
the 410,
Yeah.
you've got three vehicles on here. One's to replace the two six-wheel dumps, and the other one's replace a one-ton dump. And the 110, the one-ton dump was listed as 85,000. Is that number changed as well?
Yeah, that's the same. That has not changed. So the one-ton dump remains at 85,000, but the two dumps, so the individual prices are 293 and 250, because one is a hook lift, which is a little bit more money, and then the other one is just a dump bed and a regulator. Those prices have gone up significantly.
So it's up $133,000?
Yeah, so when we first submitted these prices back in December, we had increased roughly 10% of the cost from where we were the last time we bought one of these trucks 2 years ago. So the last time we bought a truck, one of these six-wheel dump trucks with a sander in it, it was approximately $180,000. So we increased that price to $205 per truck, thinking that would be sufficient. With everything going on in the last 3 months, we had those trucks requoted, and the standard truck that we get with a dump body and a slide-in sander came back at $250,000, just under $249,000. And operationally, we were looking at getting a hook lift truck, which will allow for different types of bodies to be moved on and off easily. Right now, when we put our sander bodies in these dump trucks, they go in and they stay in for the winter. So if we have to use a truck for hauling snow or hauling material, if we have a road job, if we have a water main break, if we need to use that truck for something else, we spend the better part of a day, or we go out and actually contract for those trucks to be brought in. So this would allow for those bodies to be swapped out on an easier basis. It'll let us expand what we do with those trucks, where right now we have a scrap metal pile that we spend, again, the better part of a day with multiple staff loading the metal into the back of a truck to then haul that off. We could pick up a dumpster that could be utilized for that operation and streamline that process. Again, same thing if we're doing demo around town. Similarly, we're looking at taking down some of the cabins over at the rec on Mill Street. We could have a dumpster, that the town owns, that we could move over there, fill up, and then haul off with this hook lift truck. But yeah, no, when I hit the floor when I saw those
Holy cow,
new
that's
quotes
a
come
big
in
number.
at 30 some odd percent above where we were, at beyond what we proposed. And that's, a combination of the truck itself. The truck itself, when we bought the last one in 2020 was $102,000. The truck quoted was $130,000 for this current year. The body with sander and a plow was $78,000 just 2 years ago, and that's now up to $115,000. Some of that quote does include, like Lance said, the controls we're putting on these sanders now, which will reduce our salt usage greatly. Which is a big impact not only to the environment, but it will be an impact to the budget too. So that is something where the trucks that we have been unregulated. They have controls on them, but the drivers have control over those, and they can, open up and change the speed and put out as much as they feel they need to put out. Where these new control systems, they run approximately $15,000 installed, will reduce our salt usage. And I think that $15,000 for those controls will come back to us within the first year in salt reduction.
Okay. I'm assuming, Maria, are you on the call? Yeah, she is, okay. Maria, you
Yeah, I'm
there?
here.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll come back to you in a few minutes, but I just wanted to make sure you've adjusted your schedule to reflect that. I also note on the schedule that you sent to me that the fire engine and ambulance lease is part of the overall total general fund request. So we should probably subtract that out, back that out, because that's actually ambulance fund. So so that takes that number down, but we're gonna have to back and increase the $2,090,237 number up by 133,000, because that's the additional cost for doing those two trucks. I don't know if you've seen that, or noted that.
So is the ambulance fund not, the
Yeah, it's a
engine and
separate-
ambulance isn't?
It's not part of the general fund, it's a separate fund. So we would subtract that out. So it does help when you do that calculation, but it just puts a tighter rein on the amount of funds available, so.
So Chris,
Okay.
can I ask you the difficult question? If by chance, is there, like say after deliberations, we felt like we couldn't fund this? I'm not saying we are, I'm just saying if we did, would there be some type of compromise with you for one of those trucks? And if it was, which I'm guessing maybe the one that does more would be your preference. I'm just want to get your input now, so we knew if it couldn't all be funded, what would be your second choice?
I think the hook lift truck is more versatile, so that's a benefit to the town.
One that's $293?
But yeah, that's the
Okay.
larger amount. That's the 293. However, as we look at the age of these trucks, one's a 2000, so that truck's now 22 years old. We have not used that truck over the last really 2 winters. We did use it or try to get it operational this year. The air brakes on it were not holding, and we weren't able to actually pull it out of the tent, the bubble out back, and put that in use this year. The other one, the 2006, broke down twice during snowstorms this year, and that's something that has salt going out. It's a mainline truck. That truck is doing 106 South Street, North Street, and plowing and salting those mainline routes. So
Chris,
really both of these
They've
trucks are
outlived
critical.
They've outlived their
They've
life.
outlived their lives, yeah.
They've outlived
So
their
so just a question I have, Chris, and that relates to the issue of, you mentioned earlier that if you needed one of these trucks for, say, a water main break or a sewer break, is it conceivable that you could fund a portion of these vehicles from the water sewer fund?
So, this kind of goes to being a DPW. The water department right now has one 6-wheel dump truck this size. That was actually the most recent one that we purchased 2 years ago. They do have a smaller dump truck that they utilize as well. Both of those come with plows, and we use those during snowstorms too. They tend to be sufficient for that operation. But we do borrow trucks, so we do go back and forth. The dump truck that the water department has, the 6-wheel dump truck, does not have a sander on it, and we don't put one on it, so that if they have a main break, they can utilize that truck. In the same breath, we use that during snow removal up in town, around the town common. So we do go back and forth and share those assets and those trucks. It would be rare that water department truck would have to be broken down for them to bring one of these highway trucks over. We could look at that, but I don't know that it's appropriate.
Well, see, I'm looking at it from the perspective that you wouldn't pay for the whole thing, but you might be able to make up the difference in the cost. Do you follow me? So In other words, if you're, I mean, I wouldn't recommend that you pay for the whole thing, whole vehicle, but I think if you could contribute to that from water or sewer, because there is use of that vehicle in that operation, that you could potentially, offset some of the additional costs that vehicle, those two vehicles, caught you by surprise on this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about it. I don't know, and Bob's on too, and can talk more about their operation. I think the water department has done what they needed to over the last few years to get vehicles appropriate for their operation. I would, and we have done that, and we've certainly done it over the years where we've cost shared.
Well, I think there's something to be said, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes when we get to Bob, but I do think that because we have the potential of using some of the federal money for some of the other items that you might be able to, that you or maybe could have cost on the water side, that this might be a way to address the need, a creative way to address the need to get what you need, and that at the same time not impact the fund on the other end by using the federal money. Do you see my point?
Yeah, I think we can carry that conversation to the funding piece when we talk about funding later on. Yeah, shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I guess maybe I just caught it now, because it's under like the school, the school stuff, the bus and stuff. So when it says free cash and/or grant, is that just a general way of putting it, or are there grants available for those, or we're just saying?
Well, we're referring to the federal money as grant.
Oh, okay.
All right,
okay.
so that's, typically, if we didn't have the grant, we would be looking at this almost as exclusively as free cash.
Everything would be free cash.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
okay.
So, but this is the unique year where we have that extra money. Also, to be discussed at some point is the fact that there's this new $1.2 trillion capital bill that's coming down that we're going to start seeing, and Chris and Lance are already looking at that right now to see what would be applicable here in Foxborough. But I do think that that addresses some of the water and sewer issues that we have that are pretty big issues that we have outlying right now funded. So we might be able to get funding for both of those.
So, let me make sure, obviously, this is my first time going through the CIP process. So, the water and sewer requests are going to be funded through water and sewer, but because of the amounts, that's how why it has to come through CIP.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
We're actually giving them permission to spend it on higher ticket things. So
your local bylaw requires that anything over $25,000 actually is supposed to, and it's of a capital nature, has to come before the committee, has to be considered by the committee before they can go for funding. So even though the funding comes from water and sewer and they're retained earnings, we still have to approve it at this level before it can be considered.
So, because why I'm asking, so to your point, if by chance we use some of the grant money for water and sewer, that might open up a little bit of funds to maybe do a cost share? Is that where you're kind of going with it?
Exactly. So there are things like, I know that Bob's been wanting to do a lot of, replacement of the water meters. And that otherwise would come from retained earnings of the water department. I think there's some water main replacement that potentially could be done. There's $1 million for a water main replacement. That could be done under the federal money, because that's considered an infrastructure type project.
We'll just use a creative way
So we're
of
just going to try to be
funding as much as we can.
as much as we
Okay.
can. So we'll get to that discussion in a few minutes. But I think what we're trying to do is maximize the funding from the state, from the feds rather, and then at the same time reduce the pressure on our own local funds to do that. Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay. Why don't you go ahead down the list further? I think it's Lance. You had the 1-ton dump. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so that's, a lot more straightforward than we just talked about. I mean, so that's replacing a 2010, which has about 157,000 miles on it right now. Probably have closer to estimated 170,000 by the time we actually get a replacement. So we're another money pit that's unsafe that we'd like to get off the road. And that's 85,000. So any discussion there?
So let's turn now to the water items.
Oh, quick question.
Sure.
Do we want to, Chris, do we need to get into the Chapter 90 discussion now, or is that part of the?
It's actually further down the
We'll-
list on this one, Lance, so it's after the water items first, and then we'll talk about Chapter 90. Okay?
Sure. Okay.
All right. Go ahead. Is it Bob going to take care of the water side, or?
Yep, Bob will talk about the water stuff.
Okay. Go ahead,
Good
Bob.
morning.
Good morning.
Am I hearable?
Yep. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, first item from water is a excavator. This is a $90,000 piece of equipment which will allow us to do bigger, larger, deeper repairs than currently we can do with our own equipment. Part of it is, you might remember Foxborough has over 20 miles of asbestos cement pipe, and this would give us the opportunity of replacing some of that with our own forces. So there's definitely a benefit with that one.
Okay.
Okay, should I go on, or is there any
Yeah,
questions?
keep going until, we'll hold you up if anybody wants to talk, we'll hold you up, okay? Go ahead, Bob.
Alrighty, next up is the $1 million North Street water main improvement. The main function of this is to be able to get water from our storage tank to the Ashcroft booster, which would be utilized primarily for any large fire on the Route 1 high pressure district. If you might remember going back to getting your COVID shots down at the stadium, that there was the large 600,000 gallon, what looked like a swimming pool in the parking lot. That was there so that the water tower could be taken offline and maintenance performed on it. Without that body of water, we would not have been able to properly, adequately cover the fire protection needs. So this water line will increase our ability to be able to put in a pump at the Ashcroft booster station that will handle that.
Right. I know that there was an attempt to actually partially pave North Street this past year. So one lane was done. So I'm assuming the reason why the other side wasn't done was because of the water main construction. But so once that construction gets done, is it the intent to overlay the entire road at that area at that point?
Yes.
Is that what your plan be? Okay.
Yeah. We there was an old gas trench out there that had settled through the years, and had deteriorated that half of the road. So what we paved was the piece that the gas main was under. After we do the water main, which will go on the unpaved side, we'll do a mill and overlay on that side of the street and potentially overlay the whole thing.
Great, perfect. Okay, moving on to the Chevy 3500.
Okay. The next three items are vehicles. They're all beyond their economic feasibility to repair. The Chevy 3500 is replacing a 2012 Ford Escape with a cracked frame. The new replacement will also be fitted for a plow so that it can also be used in snow operations.
Okay.
Following that, we have another one which will replace the very dying meter reading vehicle. This truck is used all the time in our meter reading abilities. It's dying. It's just limping along. So there's a pretty much single point of failure because it's wired up with all the antennas and the computers to actually get our reads. So we have to keep that ability going.
What year is that
And
vehicle?
it also will be fitted for a plow.
What year is that vehicle, Bob? Sorry to interrupt. What year is that?
2011 E350 van.
So this
it's an old
truck, this truck, we actually have a utility body on it. So all the meter reading equipment will be stored in the body of the truck. And as Bob just said, the current piece does not have a a plow on it. It is a van, 2-wheel drive van. Almost all trucks we have now will be outfitted with a plow on them, so they can be utilized as part of that plow operation. What we've seen is that our town staff vehicle cost and rate, salary rate is much lower than what we're paying the private side, and it's becoming more difficult to find plow drivers on the private side. So anytime we can get a new piece with a plow on it, similar to the 3500 that Bob just talked about, that's replacing a Ford Escape, that is something that the Lance was driving until the frame and the axle cracked, and we determined it was no longer usable. So we'll bring that in with a truck with a plow, so it just adds to our snow plowing equipment in town.
Is the thought that having additional vehicles for plowing will offset costs associated with gas? I mean, I know right now is probably not the right time to ask that question with gas prices being as high as they are, but it looks like you're going from an Escape and a van to two 3500s, which is a pretty big difference in power there. And if the cost is offset with plowing, I mean, I'm all for that. I'm just wondering how do we determine that?
It's a good thought, Dan, and good question. Certainly the engines were good. Everything we buying 3500 and smaller are all gas engines.
Yep.
There's certainly bigger engines than what we're using, but I think operationally it's a better piece of equipment, and like you said, it'll offset our snow and ice budget. And this piece is actually coming from the enterprise, which again the water rates are all paid by taxpayers. So
yeah, it's a little different than coming out of the general budget. I get it. I just was wondering. I know 3,500 costing 75K is about right, but an Escape probably would cost 25 or something like that. So I was just wondering if what the reasoning was behind that is all.
Okay.
Sure.
And the last is the Tahoe, the 4500, 4550.
Yes, that's replacing a 2009 Ford Explorer, which is used by multiple staff, but including the GIS mapping technician who we send them out to locate and map things for us.
Questions from the committee?
No, maybe just to Dan's point, do you need a Chevy Tahoe? I mean, so that's not going to be used for other purposes other than just to get around town?
Yeah, that piece will stay in town. We have some of the GPS equipment and the survey equipment that gets used, is big enough that it needs a decent back seat or back of a truck. We'd actually looked at, again, do we get another truck for that purpose? A lot of times he's off-road construction sites. We're looking at, 4-wheel drive vehicle that can be used throughout the winter. We had actually priced out a 3,500 with just a regular pickup body, and it was 54,000, and the Tahoe actually came in at 49,000. So we may actually adjust that number. It was actually pretty close to get a 3,500 with a regular pickup body to getting a Chevy Tahoe.
Okay. So that was the better price actually to get compared to the two. Okay.
Yeah, I guess maybe I was just questioning, do you need a
Chris, can I ask a quick question? You just said 49. We have 45.5 here.
Yeah.
Yep, and that was so the price of the Tahoe.
Yeah, okay.
And these the two items we can adjust on, and this is something when Bob finished, I was going to go for the Chevy 3,500 for the town engineer. We can actually bring that cost down. It's currently in there at 75,000. We can bring that price down to. We could bring it down to 55,000. I'd probably want to leave it at 60, just in case prices escalate between now and when we get it. We have an estimate at 54,773. So
no, right. I guess what I'm saying is the Tahoe line item specifically, we have on our sheet as 45.5, and you just said 49. Is that just?
Yeah. So the the Tahoe price would have to go up to the 49,770. So I would
Why don't you
leave
say
that at
50,
50,000.
yeah,
Say 50,
yeah,
okay,
say
yep.
50, yeah.
No, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right numbers is all.
Yep. No, you're right.
Yeah,
you're
so
right.
that was, you know, as part of same thing with the two larger dump trucks Lance talked about earlier, trying to get, you know, up to date quotes as we could. We had those come in, I think, Wednesday of this past week.
Sure.
So
there's
if I'm
up
not
to date as we could
mistaken,
get.
the overall total will actually go down by 10,000 if that's the case, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So, you know, one of the Chevy 3500s can be 60 instead of 75.
7,500, right.
Okay.
So my number comes out to be 1,275,500.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. All right, let's go down to any other questions from the committee? We good? Okay. Let's go down to chapter 90, Chris. Or Lance, so who's
Chris,
gonna
did you
address
want
that?
me to talk on this? I can talk on it.
Yeah, go ahead, Lance.
All right. So right now, what we're showing in the, at least on my FY23 summary, we show 650,000 for the Chapter 90 and transportation network funding. And when in reality, that needs to go up. We're actually receiving more funding than we typically do on that. And I think, Bill, you know, I think we exchanged emails on that. The Chapter 90 is going up by, you know, we're getting an extra 50% on that potentially. And then in addition to that, we're also getting winter maintenance funding in a similar proportion. So it looks like in total that number will probably go up to more like 1.25 million that we'll be receiving, you know, which is great. You know, it'll help us in a lot of ways. So that'll, you know, especially with the projects we're trying to do this year. So that's going up, which is great news. And then we also have the meals tax on here, and I'm not sure where that stands, but I think we put a number in there, which is close to what has been historical.
Yeah, so the goal has been to try and maintain at least $1 million in funding towards roads. We haven't always been able to meet that number, as you all know, based on our funding cycle. And so the question then becomes, how much will be available in meals tax? And clearly the number's gone up this year. Then there's also the offsetting factor of the OPEB as well. So then the question is, typically what happens, and historically, if you take a look at this, you can see that the vast majority of the money has gone towards roads, and rather has gone towards OPEB, and with whatever's been left over to go towards roads. Now, that said, we've always try to supplement that with free cash, things of that nature, to make it work. There was never any language in the policy to say that we have a goal of getting to $1 million. We added that language in the recent version
Right,
of the
the most recent
policy,
one, yeah.
so which actually is a good thing, because I think we should at least have that. And then I think the issue then becomes whether or not we want to do anything with meals tax this year, because we're getting the additional money from the state anyways.
So can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So we're thinking the Chapter 90 money's up, say it comes in at 1.25, right?
Yeah.
Then what, the meals tax would roll over into an account that we would hold until?
It just stays and it'll stay in free cash.
Okay.
So
The meals
basically,
tax is free cash, it's worth it.
Okay, it can go to free
Yeah.
cash.
Yes,
There's
you
no
can.
restrictions on
yeah,
it.
so the goal is to make the OPEB
Not
payment, whatever's
cash,
above that,
Yeah.
then we'll put
exactly, right,
put
yeah.
aside put into free cash, but will we put that money, or we'd have to put that money,
It'll stay in free cash.
yeah, but it would have to be earmarked for either roads or future OPEB payment, right?
No, so what happens, the way this works is this, I appreciate the fact you don't really understand the mechanics of this, is that what happens is that the meals tax, at the end of the fiscal year, rolls into free cash automatically, because
It's part of local
it's part of the overall local receipts, and whatever we receive, then it gets differentiated, and Marie accounts for this, and because she has to, because of the way we have it set up. And then you'll see how much at the end of the year, how much we really will have. Now, this current year, we have estimated as part of the budget process, the $1 million or so for the OPEB payment that we normally do up until the past 2 years.
Right.
Okay? However, last year, we paid for the fiscal '21 portion at the end of, in October, November?
Yes,
In
November.
was, yeah, in November town meeting.
Again.
The
same
plan,
thing.
the plan is to do the same thing this year as well, to pay the 22 payment in November as well.
Yes.
However, for '23, we'll be back on cycle,
Right.
okay?
Right.
All right, so I think that's good, that's a good thing. Now, as far as the meals tax goes, though, and if we don't use all the meals tax, it just automatically rolls to free cash and stays there. Okay, so we don't have to do anything more with it, it'll just stay in free cash.
The only thing is, it's been said that that money is supposed to be used for OPEB or roads.
Yeah, either
So
one.
So, I mean, I would say after the OPEB, it should be going to roads, or if we're not gonna use it that particular year for either one of those, I would say it needs to be earmarked for those two purposes. I wouldn't say it
So here-
could sit in free cash and be used for anything.
So here's the challenge, all right, because typically, every year, the vast amount of money, almost the entire amount,
Was
is
going to-
is going to OPEB anyways.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't any left over.
Yeah.
That would sit in the account anyways.
In
know, so-
the annual town report,
We would always put the additional, would really come from free cash.
there's a little
Right.
chart in there that I've continued doing with Randy. What Randy started it, I've continued it, I put it in the annual report, but some years we were actually over on what we had used, and then other years you see it's under. But it's being tracked year by year, like how much did we use
Exactly.
of the actual amount that we took in. So I think
We account for all of it.
Right.
Well, so that's my question. So we have 350 here from meals tax, and we have a number for supporting OPEB, right?
Right.
But all of that is an estimate, right?
Right.
We don't know what it.
Right.
So
We have
like
no idea what's gonna
this
be, yeah.
350 is assuming that you look at what you have for OPEB, then you have 250 out of meals tax for OPEB, and then you're just assuming based on an estimate what's going to come in at the end of the year that 350 will be there. But we don't know if it's higher or lower or anything anyway.
So in order for us to,
Right.
so in order for us to meet what would typically be an OPEB payment plus the road payment, we would have to take in 1.35 million. 1 million to go to OPEB, 350,000 to go to meals.
Right.
We would have to take that in and.
In local receipts.
As the local receipt.
Yeah.
To offset that cost.
Yes.
Now, we've been taking in typically, on a good year, pre-COVID, around about 1 million, a little about 1.1 million
Yeah.
maybe.
Yes.
So we're really short by 250,000 each year. So-
Yeah, easy, right.
Yeah, so that's the issue.
Right.
And so I don't think we're gonna have a real,
Yeah.
overage in that respect, all right? So we're not
Yeah.
gonna,
Well, that was funny, because I was thinking that, I knew like it was like, 900,000.
85,000.
Close to a million.
Yeah, it's close to $1 million,
And,
so.
but no, I mean, my question, I guess maybe I misunderstood what you were saying when you said if it was over, it would just go back to free cash. Like, I just wanted to make sure that whatever comes in from meals tax is used for those two purposes.
Fair enough, yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I mean, so I.
If you guys are tracking it, then you know what
and
you're.
we would
yeah.
know what it is. So I guess what we would say is that if there is any extra money from meals tax, that would roll towards OPEB. But we won't know that before we go to town meeting. That's the only
Right,
problem.
but you see it at the end of the year report as to where we stood from last year, so then it's just a matter of trying to get back on after
Right.
the fact. The only thing that I might make a suggestion to, at this point is, we're negating in two places. We're talking about the 1.8 million, the 900 and the 900 that we're directly getting
Yeah,
from, the feds.
yeah, so actually it comes up to be 1.95.
1.95, I rounded it.
Yeah.
The other half is the portion we're getting, or not even half, it's more.
It's more.
From the county,
3.5 roughly.
3.5. The difference, the way I've always looked at it, and this is just my thought process on it, is the 1.95 we use for doing a lot of these, I'm gonna buy a bus with it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy a.
The main list of issues that you got here.
Right. The one that you're doing through the county, and I'm kind of pointing at Chris at this point, The Chapter 90, the way we do Chapter 90 projects is we get an approval from the state, and then we start the project, and then as the project's going on, Chris is getting, okay, here's all the bills for this month on it, puts it in, they reimburse us. The way they're trying to handle it through the state, through the county, pardon me, is very much the same way.
Same approach, yeah.
So I'm not sure, maybe, if, assuming that we can use it for roads, it seemed like that was one of the things, roads and sidewalks and infrastructure.
Yeah.
Maybe you put more of that money towards your sidewalks and roads as opposed to the one.
Well, the other side of it is if you're doing $1 million water main project,
Right.
why wouldn't you add additional pavement costs into that to account for the full cost?
Right.
Or has that been assumed, Chris?
Usually, we try to piggyback the two. I mean, there are projects water main projects that the road's in, not bad shape, I'll say. And, the water department and that rate and that capital cost includes repaving the road. To the extent that in the past we've done curbing and sidewalk because we did all the service laterals, through the existing sidewalk. So we put back brand new. Since then we've been trying to piggyback a road that needs to be paved with a water main project first, and then repaving with either Chapter 90 or meals tax funds. There is a cost associated with that, certainly, that could be put back on the capital project for the water. But again, I think the point of the DPW is trying to, put those funds and those projects in a place where they were working together and not against each other.
Right, so
And certainly we
Can I ask one last
expand-
question on this?
Okay.
So we had 650 and 350. We're talking about what's going to happen with the meals tax. Okay, great. We could get as much as 1.25, which is more than the million we have here, which means, am I assuming correctly that you're going to have more roads or more square foot of area of paving that you can do with that 1.25 anyway, right? So
Yes.
based on what
It
you were
won't- it
planning on
unfortunately
doing
won't be
with
as
$1
much
million,
as we hope.
we should be able to do more regardless, right?
Yeah, theoretically, yeah, so.
Yeah, you're gonna utilize all the money you get.
Right.
That's right.
The 1.25.
Yeah,
Yeah, so whatever your game plan is for this year, if your Chapter 90 is gonna increase from 650, you're gonna take that 1.250 and you're gonna do whatever you can with it, right?
Yeah, the goal is that, I think for the Chapter 90 funds, whatever they give us for money, if it doubles, we're going to use as much of that with the mindset that this year may not be the year to double the amount of work because the money's not going to go as far. With oil prices where they are, with
Right, I was gonna
construction
suggest
costs
that.
where they
Can
are.
we hold Chapter
This-
90?
but
Like if
that-
we get 1.25, we don't
We can
have to
hold it.
spend all of it
We can
this year?
store it, right?
You
We
can
can
go to
store it.
whatever
Yeah, we can
project.
store it.
Okay.
We
That's
can
great.
hold it.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
I thought it was you had to use it every year.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
You can build it
And
up. In fact, some
There's
places, some
$500,000
communities do.
left, they just start a new project with.
Some communities will take the Chapter 90 money and use it for buying trucks and everything else, and we try not to do that. We try to put it on the roads. So,
Okay.
we try to do.
They're pretty specific with buying trucks. You've got to show that the truck is going to be used for asphalt. So we could buy like a hot box for pothole repair. So that's something that we go in the morning. We get 3 tons of asphalt from the plant. It keeps it hot all day long, so it's usable, and we can do potholes around town. We could use Chapter 90 funds for that. They have to approve the use of the money before we actually go and buy that piece of equipment. I think the point of putting the meals tax in is to put it in and show it that's the goal is to have $1 million of paving funding every year. If for the time being the meals tax doesn't allow that, then it doesn't allow that. But I think that's the policy that's been put out through the financial policies that have been reviewed and signed by some, approved by some, not necessarily everybody, but the goal is to have $1 million. That's why we have it in there, and then we have it in there as part of the 5-year plan to offset the Chapter 90 costs. So if it's not there, and I think the understanding is that we're trying to put almost $1 million a year into OPED. Until that clears out, that we're not going to get that offset.
So I
but
think,
it's there,
the
just to
issue
show
is
that it's there. That's part of the goal.
I think the point is, Chris, is that we're already gonna exceed the $1 million policy of 1.25 with the state money this year, because it's a unique year. But if that money wasn't there, we didn't double up on the state money, we would be looking right back at the 350 for the meals tax to do that. So I think, no, I don't think anybody here was saying we shouldn't use it for that. But I think the other side of that is, this is a unique year where the state come up with some additional money. And by the way, I agree with you 100%. This is not the time to be spending it on asphalt. If you can hold off, because it's not gonna go as far. You know?
So this big amount they're giving you this year, Chris, this is just because of COVID and costs possibly being higher. So you may not get that money next year. It'll be a different number next year. Could be higher, could be lower.
It'll probably be like closer to 650.
Probably back to what you were getting.
Probably back to what we were.
The last year, so the two pieces that increased this 650 up, one is an increase in the Chapter 90 funding through the state. So as Lance said, he has taken what is a $200 million budget statewide and made it $300 million is what he's proposed. Now, it hasn't been passed yet, but that's what the governor has proposed. The other piece to it is that he has proposed a $100 million statewide budget for winter road repairs. So the last time they did this, it was, I think, $30 million, and I think it was 2015 after that bad winter. So I think he saw the blizzard, he saw some of these other storms, the freeze, the thaws, and realized that the towns could use additional funding. So that's what takes a $600, and we just got the letter, $620,000 payment from the state, and doubles that to 1.24.
Yeah, they're talking
the
about
other
the
piece-
potholes all over the news and how bad they
Yeah,
are.
and I think there's a lot of support for that at the legislative level. I mean,
So,
both.
basically, Chris, you'll
houses.
be able to, whatever the amount is that you get, you have a mechanism to put that in some type of little fund for under your DPW for roads, and you'll use that as when you feel it's a good time to start spending.
Yeah, the state holds that money. We put our project list together. We apply to the state for that funding. They approve it. We do the projects. Once we pay the invoices, we send the invoices to the state, and they send that funding back to the town. So we have a line item, Chapter 90 line item that we pay out of. We pay it in a deficit during the year. As long as that money comes back from the state within the same fiscal year, we're in good shape.
And I would just add that, that's great you're gonna get this money this year, but anything above the OPEB payment, I would say just goes to you in whatever fund it is. I mean, should be spent on roads, because that's what
Yeah, I
the
don't think
people,
anybody objects to
what
that.
the people wanted. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you start putting some type of, for lack of a better word, I guess just a safety net, or, maybe we look into even if it's $50,000 over, what we make the OPEB payment. I mean, it should go to roads, so.
So we
Well, that's
probably
gonna be
won't.
that's gonna be a talk for next, right?
Yeah,
What,
so-
what
so
we
we
put
won't-
into OPEB versus what we leave out,
Right.
and then how it gets appropriated, right? That's
Yeah, that's
gonna
right,
be.
yeah. So that's my point in that discussion, is that we don't know, really, but at this point in time, we won't know until June 30th how much we actually collected for meals.
Right.
You follow me? So I think the only way we could actually do this properly is to do an appropriation for the fall.
Well, so let me ask you this, right? So we have our OPEB payment, right?
Yeah.
And say, we plan on putting $1 million into OPEB, right? Okay, so if meals tax comes in at 1.1, which it won't, right?
Yeah, right.
Then we'd have $100,000, and we have. Does this number go down for street reconstruction? Go down to 150, or are we saying we're gonna, no matter what, put 350 into streets, and then you'd need to source the additional $250,000, which would be the warrant article for the OPEB, right? Is that how that works?
So here's
So if
how-
you're short, say we're going 350 here, which means you're only funding OPEB $750,000 from meals taxes.
Right.
That last 250 is the warrant article to fully fund it, right?
Right, well,
No, that's not correct. So what you just described is that for the fall of this year, we're gonna fund the whole thing from meals tax. or.
No, we did it from free cash
For free
last
cash,
year.
which is really what came from meals tax.
Okay, right, okay.
So, but what'll happen, let me walk this back a little bit. So how I would envision this to happen, if you want to try and make sure that whatever's left over from the meals tax, we would take whatever's left over and put it in the form of a warrant article for the fall and just say, this is the remaining money that's left out of meals tax that should be appropriated for roads. You follow me?
Right, so I guess what I'm saying is, we plan on putting $1 million into OPEB, right,
Yep.
just to call it a number, right?
Yeah.
If meals tax fully funded that, would we even,
If you had any money left over.
you would have wiped it out, it would have been zero, right?
Right, it'd be left.
So, but I guess what I'm saying is, we have a 350 line item here for
So what-
meals tax. So if we plan on leaving that there, do you then fund the OPEB payment through the town warrant article?
Yeah, so the 350 is just a guess right here, all right? So what I would say to you is that the 350 is an estimate to get to $1 million. That's the reason why he put it in that way. All
Right.
So it was 650 plus 350 equals $1 million, all right?
Yep.
But what's happened is this year, we're getting 1.25 from the state, 1.24 from the state. So we don't need to have that calculation. So that's just a guess.
Right, so I'm
But he's
thinking of the
saying
calculation on the other side, right? So we're gonna our obligation to OPEB is $1 million? Is that what we do? annually?
985.
985, right? Okay. Now, if we had, let's just go with, we got 985 in meals tax,
Right.
right? Let's just, that was our number that came in, it's even, right?
Right.
But we still have 350 here.
Did
Do we
you
then
need it to
take,
get up to that point, right?
we then take 350 out of what we were gonna pay so does that 350 then, is that the warrant article to fully fund OPEB? Because you don't have it, because you account for it here?
So he's saying that you're adjusting OPEB down, we've never had.
We
Okay.
haven't done it that way.
Right,
We've never done it that
exactly.
way.
Okay,
No,
Never done it
so,
that way. So
and-
what we
and
typically
where-
have done, we've typically paid the OPEB straight out of the meals tax. And if we didn't have enough, we would then supplement it with.
With free cash or
free cash, got it, okay.
So would you have paid, so to Dan's point, okay, it's $1 million, $1 million
Right,
comes
12
in,
million,
we fund OPEB. So if we weren't getting the 1,250,000, say we had to go with this, so would we be taking the 350 out of free cash
You would probably have to.
to fund the
Yes,
million? To
yes.
fund the million?
Because there's no other source for us to
Yeah,
go there.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
you follow me?
Yeah, no, that's just what I wanted to hear, yep.
Yeah. So I think the question is, I would say, my recommendation to you all is to hold off on the meals tax appropriation until the fall, till we know how much we've collected.
Right, oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Makes sense.
If there's
And then-
more money left over, then we can appropriate that, right? At this point, I don't know what the answer
Anyway,
is.
to do the OPEB to begin with. The
We
other-
think-
In the big part, what we're gonna end up with, because we're making up a payment, the big part, we're gonna be just like, we didn't fund it for 1 year. That we didn't fund for 1 year for the OPEB.
Well,
And after we we were almost not gonna fund it a second year, but we decided to fund it. And so, in the big picture, for OPEB's purposes, it's just gonna be one payment we didn't make. Because of the COVID year, we were getting.
No,
No, we made it
we'll
up.
we're
If we
completely
this
caught up.
fall,
We'll be caught up this
we'll
fall.
be
Oh,
even.
okay,
We'll be
okay, we're
We'll be
complete,
even.
okay.
Yeah.
So the 1 year we decided not to,
We just delayed it,
Okay.
that's all we
Right.
did.
okay.
So we
For
did
some
one
reason, I
this-
thought there was a second year.
That's this year.
That's gonna be the next fall. We'll
Okay,
pick-
okay.
catch up
The
the other
last
two.
payment, yeah.
Okay,
Right,
okay.
right.
So we had 2 catch-up payments, but we've made
We've already
one.
done one,
make
we're gonna do
second
the
one in
other
the
one.
fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason we're gonna do that is because then we'll know how much we actually collected for the year.
And you'll know what your
We'll
free
know,
cash
yeah.
is.
So you know what we'll know going into special town meeting in the fall, how much meals tax we pulled in.
Yes.
There will be a bunch left over because we'll have paid OPEB and, well, assuming there will be, based on the estimates, there'll be some left over.
Right.
And we won't have to use any of it on streets as of right now because we're over that 1 million from the chapter 90.
Yep.
And then whatever's left, we use to fund the second OPEB payment, and whatever's left out of that, you appropriate to roads specifically because we've said we're gonna use meal tax on roads.
That's exactly
Well,
right.
and hopefully, moving forward, I mean,
That's
we
the
wouldn't,
thought.
we're not gonna have that
Assuming all
year
those
like that
according to plan,
COVID
which
year,
it
the meal
does.
tax
That's
wasn't.
the best laid plan.
Because, I mean, technically, there's something signed that says that OPEB payment has to be made, regardless,
Yeah,
Right.
regardless
yeah,
of,
selectmen-
like, if we get,
selectmen
yeah,
policy,
if we get 600,000, unfortunately, we're pulling another,
You're pulling
you know,
out of free
another
cash.
385
Pull it out
for
of
free
free
cash
cash,
to
'cause you
to
get-
pay.
there's no
it.
other source.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
So, all right, so now I think we beat that one to death. But,
Yeah.
that's all right.
That's what you have
But
me
it's-
and Dan here for.
That's right. So, but that's good though. I'm glad at least you understand where we're coming from.
Well, I gotta
think
answer to
it's-
Jack, so, all
I know,
right?
I
I mean, like, I'm on top of my
I'm
game
with you.
here.
I'm with you on that.
That's the
Oh,
first
my
thing he's
game.
gonna ask you at your
Oh, I
next
know.
meeting.
Oh, I
I'm with you
know.
on that one. So.
He's watching.
Yeah,
I know
I'm
he's
sure.
watching.
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. So. All right. Well, listen. I think that's it as far as items on the list. So, Chris, on your list, is there anything else you want to add or you want to talk about at this point?
I think the only thing I have, it's not part of this list, but I know one of the things we had talked about was, the county money.
Yep.
For the ARPA funds. I didn't know if we wanted to touch on a couple of those projects that we had talked about, Bill. There were a couple DPW items. I know you talked about the dams earlier. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to discuss some of those items, or if we're waiting for a different point in time to talk about the stuff beyond the 1.9 that we have in our funds directly. Because I know we talked about like the water meter replacement, some of the dam work, and some of the other items that may or may not meet that county funding.
Yeah. So there are a couple things we should talk about, Chris, because I think this is all part of the. I think this is almost like. I think what I want to do is try and look at this as being a capital discussion today, and almost like a separate discussion or strategy for how we pay for it all. Because even though I think we want to try and get to that point, but I want to actually have an understanding about how we can use a full understanding of how we can use the federal money first. Because I think my guess is that we'll be able to pay for most of these items with federal money without having to go to free cash at all. If we did have to go to free cash, it should be pretty minimal. Now, one thing that strikes me is on this list is the North Street main water replacement. That is a specific project that could get approval through the county, because that's a water main replacement.
Right, so that's part of the list of what we submitted back in December.
Right.
A couple of the other items, the water meter replacement, residential water meter replacement.
Yeah.
We've been looking at that for a couple of years now. A couple of years ago, the town, approved $200,000 for that project. We're looking at trying to replace at least half of the water meters in town, which would be 3,000 meters. And we're looking at close to $1 million, if not more, to do that work. So that is something that would also qualify for the ARPA funds if we had to apply through the county for that work. So I guess my question is, do those projects need to be approved by CIP, by this group?
They do. They do.
It's not. So that,
They do.
I guess that's my thought is that, while I have Bob and Lance still hanging on here, have that conversation just about, the water meters in particular. We're ready to go out to bid for that water meter replacement. Certainly we only have 200,000 now. So that gets us, maybe 500 of those 3,000. And that's a significant project for the water department and the town to take on. It's the unaccounted for water in Foxborough has not been good. DEP is looking at us as it's a major problem in town. We are supposed to be, 10% or less, and we are, in the mid 30s. We feel strongly. We've looked at our leak detection. We're not finding leaks in the system. We've looked at our metering. We've looked at our billing. We've looked at, our records, across the board. And the one thing that jumps out at us is that we have, at least half of our residential meters are past their useful life, which is about 10 years. We have meters in the system that are 20 years old, and those meters just slow down as time goes on. And I've seen some of the other towns and consultants look at their residential metering, and and find 15 to 20% of their unaccounted for water going through residential meters, which is significant for the ratepayers, it's significant for the water department,
Right.
and it's certainly significant for DEP. So, something like that, if the the county money, is something that's on the table as far as how we fund these different projects, that is something that I would like to throw into the mix as part of the conversation today and approval by this committee, when we get to that point.
All right, so just hold on to that thought, because that's, we'll put that on a separate list, because
Okay.
that along with, and I think the water main project, because that's, right there's $2 million out of the $3.5 million that we could spend on those projects. All right, yeah, so I think you might be able to do it. Now, the
Now,
other,
is CIP allowed to, so basically, the money coming to the county would also not have to go to town meeting, I'm assuming, like the federal
that's
money?
right, that's right. Well,
So can the CIP committee get together another time and when you have a number of that?
Yep.
And get together and vote to spend that money on
So-
CIP items, or is it
So
not?
my goal today was to do one thing and one thing only, and then we'll talk about the financing piece secondly, okay? The first goal is to make sure that we review all the items, because the bylaw says the committee has to consider all these items, okay? And then I have to put together a plan for the Board of Selectmen for consideration. Now, the only thing that really requires to go to town meeting at this point are things that we're using our own money for. For instance, even water and sewer money would still have to go to the town meeting for
Yes,
approval.
yes.
But anything that does require federal money does not. Okay? So I think my first question to all of you is, as you go down this list, including the water meter, and I'm gonna say it just for the sake of clarification, because I don't, now that and when Bill mentioned this morning that we approved the removing the building over at.
Laundry building?
The laundry building.
Laundry building.
I thought that we actually voted on it, but I looked back and I couldn't seem to see that. So I thought, but because we got $50,000 for that, we would need money for that too. But I do think that we add all those items and at the end of the day, does anybody have any questions or concerns about any of those items? Because if that's the case, then we just need to come up with a financing plan to make this work. Do you follow me? So, I mean, it's not a case of us, every item I've seen so far makes a good case. I don't see anything in here that makes.
Agreed.
That doesn't jump off and say, hey, look, that's a waste of money.
Right.
We shouldn't do that. If there's agreement from this committee, then I think it's a case of I sit with you, George, and Marie, and we find out what we can spend and what we can't spend from the federal money, and then come back, call a second meeting of this committee, and say, this is what we came up with a financing.
Here's the list, and does
Here's the
everything
financing
go
plan.
with it? Right.
Does that make
100%
sense?
on board, 100% on board with that.
Okay?
Absolutely,
All right.
definitely.
So that, I mean, if that's the case, then we're essentially done today, all right? Because I think there's nothing else that we can do until we come up with that plan. And so I would rather have a second meeting of this board and we'll present you with a financing plan for all of it.
Well, can I ask a question on that? Because I know we've been through this
Yeah.
going on, 2-3 years now.
Sure.
The county money has been tied up for a long time.
Right.
Oh, God, yeah.
So what's the guarantee we're going to see it?
Well, it's an interesting point. I'm glad you raised that.
Yeah, it's just something
Yeah, no,
we've gone over
it's-
year to year, and
it's been
I know you guys are more frustrated than anyone else, so
I'm probably
just
the most
asking.
frustrated guy in this room about that issue.
Yeah.
But I will say this, when we are making progress on that. So what's happened in that is that it hasn't been that long. It's actually been, we only got approval of the ARPA money this past year.
This seems like forever.
It seems like forever. But what's happened is that the federal government has, they came up with a $10 million cap, if you will, that if you had loss of revenue during COVID of up to $10 million, then you would have the ability to spend your ARPA money in virtually in any way you wanted to spend it. I mean, you couldn't spend it on pensions, you couldn't spend it on OPEB, but you could spend it on virtually anything else. And so, for the 1.95 million, it's a home run, we can do that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the 3.5 million
Right.
that because what happened was the federal government put a $10 million cap on the entire county for the,
Yeah.
for the use of that money. So we're limited in what we can do. So we've appealed to the House and actually appealed to the U.S. Senate through our congressman and through our U.S. Senator's office to try and make that money available to us on an individual basis, not on a countywide basis. And we're making progress, all right?
Yep.
But having said that, if we don't get that approval, we still could put a couple $1 million at least.
To link these things for
Because they're
water.
eligible
Yeah.
right now regardless,
Right.
okay? Because there are different buckets in which you can put the money
Right.
in. You can put them, if it's an infrastructure project for water or sewer, cable, Wi-Fi, any one of those projects, you can actually spend the money because it's eligible right now. So I think we would in fact have the ability to come back and say, okay, we can pay for this, we can pay for that, we can pay for this. The only thing that would be left on the list, the things that doesn't make it onto the list because it doesn't fall into any other category, and we would have to wait to see if in fact the federal government gives us the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Okay? Everybody clear now?
Yep. So, two more questions. The first is for Chris. So we have a citizens petition, right?
Yep.
It's for $75,000 for a warrant article for this year for sidewalks on South Street.
Right.
So I'll reach out to you to discuss about whether that 75K is actually the right number, right, for the length of road. But I guess my point is going from the 1 million to the 1.25, which I know we don't have settled yet, but say it does come in at 1.25.
Yep.
Is that something we can include in that instead of having a warrant article about it? Just can you give me some ideas on what you're thinking on that?
Sure. I think, specifically to, is 75,000 enough? It's unknown. The construction itself, if it was simple, would 75 would be enough. There is a stream in that stretch, which will require permitting and engineering, which will drive that cost up. It's not going to be a simple put a sidewalk here. There's utility poles. There's some right-of-way concerns. Is it wide enough to put that in? What kind of buffer do we have from the street? That project specific, there are concerns about is $75,000 going to be enough? And I just don't know yet, without going deeper into it. I think overall, and we've talked a little bit about this, is that the right approach for sidewalks in town? We have over 50 miles of sidewalk in town, and at this point, there's been minimal funding put into what we have. And I'm a strong proponent, and I know Lance is as well. Let's take care of what we have before we start expanding the system. We are working right now with a consultant who does our pavement management plan to do our sidewalk management plan for us. They're going to take the complete streets prioritization plan. They're going to take our ADA compliance plan. They're going to consolidate those plans into a true sidewalk management plan, and look at funding sources, what we should be spending, how we should be spending that money moving forward, to complement the pavement management piece.
Sure.
So it's something that we are working on. Lance and I are working on, to put that plan into place. And I would hate to see something like these one-off warrant articles come forward to disrupt that plan, that town-wide plan.
So 100%. I think what I wanted to kind of get a feel from you on was, we have an extra $500,000 from Chapter 90 that we can use. You would recommend not using that for this specific sidewalk project. So when I talk to the petitioner, I can say, if you really feel that this is necessary, if you really feel that you're going to move forward with this, which it sounds like they want to, then it's not going to be covered by anything else. You're going to actually have to push this and get the town to agree with you on this.
Yeah, and I think
I just want to make sure that we weren't doubling up or something like that. So when I talk to the petitioner, when I meet with him about the warrant article, I need to make clear, hey,
fair enough.
Yeah, that's all I really want.
So typically, in a situation like that, Dan, you'd use free cash to pay for something like that because it's a one-off.
Right, but if Chris was like, oh, yeah, that's something we can incorporate using these extra funds we had, I would say, hey, this becomes less of a big deal, we can kind of just move on from it, but it doesn't seem like that's the case, just from his plan is, and that's,
That's something
we have him there.
we've talked
That's why
about,
it's
we talked
there.
about internally, is like, we have a plan that we're trying to put in place to fix sidewalks, fix the existing ones we have, let alone build new ones.
Yep.
And I think the bigger concern to me is that you really do open up Pandora's box if you do this, because if you let one person get approved
Oh,
like that,
100%.
it opens up the whole
100%.
spectrum of.
But
how
like
many
my
people are
role
gonna
on
be
the
next to you.
AdCom is to
I
vet
think
the
I said, I think I said that
You know
when
what
you,
I mean? Right,
yeah, when you presented the
Yeah.
articles to us at the selectmen's meeting, the
that's a
first
big
thing I said is,
concern.
first of all, I'm all for sidewalks, don't
Yeah,
get me wrong.
none of us disagree with it,
And I
yeah.
get the frustration
Right.
if where you live, if there's a pothole, if there's something. But yeah, my fear is if, I guess it'll be decided at town meeting floor, but my fear is that if this does pass, then that means next town meeting, we could have 10 same petitions,
Yeah.
and you have to worry, well, where is this money coming from? You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, my job is just to vet the article to make
Yeah.
sure that
Right.
it's
Yeah.
clear to go to the town floor, and I
Totally
just want to
understood.
make sure to get on the same page
Yeah.
with Chris as to what the plan was, and
Totally
it doesn't
understood.
feel like that stretch of the road is in the plan, and at least anytime soon, so
Yeah.
if that's something that this person really feels is necessary, he's gonna have to, convince the
Convince
town at
the
town meeting
town,
that it's
yeah.
necessary.
Yeah,
I just need to
exactly.
make sure that it's good to go from the AdCom side of it.
Yeah.
So my last question is, looking at what we have for certified free cash from the state, it's a little short of 3.9. Looks like, based on what we have here, we're at about 1.8. And both of those numbers will move a little bit before we actually get to the point where we're settling on numbers to bring to town meeting,
So-
right?
Don't forget, we've already used 9 right at the.
Yeah, we used 9 at the fall, in the fall
town
town meeting,
meeting.
so it's really 3 million, but.
Three,
but-
okay.
But what I want to say to you, Dan, is that my goal would be to use all of the federal money for what's.
Not using.
Right. So I just looked at, the last time it was certified was October 15th.
Right.
And then we spent a little bit, we spent about 9
9.
at the
And
fall
there
meeting.
is some built in
And
to
then-
do the
right,
budget
and
that
they'll-
we're working on.
Right,
So-
right. Okay.
How much is the federal money, Bill?
It's
What are we looking at?
1.95 from the direct funding.
Yeah.
And another 3, it's actually less than 3.5, because they gotta spend, some money has to go to the county as well.
Yeah, they get
So
10%.
They get
off
like
the top.
10% off the top. from
But
there,
right
so-
now, we could go ahead with the 1.9.
Yes, we could use the
access
1.9, I could use the 1.95. So let me do this.
Well, can I ask there's restrictions on that 1.9, right? As to what we can
No,
use
there's
it for?
really
or
not
is
many
it-
restrictions on the 1.95.
Oh,
It's-
okay.
It's the 3.3
The
or.
county portion.
So, all right,
That's the issue.
I'm misunderstanding, okay.
Yeah.
So, the 1.9 is or is not ARPA money?
It is ARPA money.
It is ARPA.
There's 2 types of ARPA money. Straight direct
From the
funding,
Fed.
direct funding to the town,
Yeah.
and then direct funding to the county.
So what Bill was talking about for ARPA funds for a chiller is different than the ARPA funds that we're talking about for the budget?
Right, so what
Two
what
different
Bill,
things?
what Bill was suggesting is that we may want to use the county portion
Piece.
Yep.
for the chillers.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would actually be a way to offset the money that we've already put away in free cash for
And then
that.
what we don't use, then that could go back
Right,
into
go back
free
into
cash.
free cash.
Got it, okay,
Right.
okay, yep.
So I actually support his concept there. It actually
Oh, yeah,
makes sense.
100%, I
Yeah.
misunderstood the differences, because we just call it ARPA,
Just
so.
trying to find a way
Yeah.
to spend
One has
what we
more
can.
red
Well, we
tape.
can,
right?
that's
Yeah, right,
Because I don't think you want that to lay around. I think you want to take care of it and get rid of it.
Where is that?
Because, and I don't mean that I don't mean to sound so cavalier
No,
about
but-
it. But it's money that you want to use.
Yeah, if we had doubts about some of the requests, then
Right.
that's different, but if we
Right.
think the requests are good, then spend it.
So
right?
let me do this. I'll sit with Marie and George and we'll come up with a spending or a financing plan for this plan. And I'll call for a meeting either, I'll try to do it, I'll do it during the week. I won't do it
Yeah.
on Saturday. And I'll present the financing plan for you. And then you can, if you agree with it, then we can recommend it to send it to the selectmen.
Can I put a
for
request in for formatting on that? Can we have just the expenditures and then the revenue source next to it?
Yep.
Just so we can see them like just like
Sure,
that?
yeah, we'll
That would be great.
Yeah, we'll identify where the money's coming from.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I have a feeling it's all gonna be from pretty much the same place.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, that's what it sounds like, it would be
Maybe a
great.
few small items, like, for instance, like, maybe we pay for Bob's, voting machines out of free cash. I mean.
Yeah, it's small enough.
Or
It's
the
not gonna be
instruments
going-
or whatever,
Yeah,
right,
maybe
yeah,
something.
no, right, 100%.
That's stuff that
Yeah, that's small.
we probably would have moved forward
Right,
through
anyway.
Yeah,
with
with
just
free
free cash and
yeah.
not
I mean,
necessarily.
if we spend $100,000 on free cash, we're gonna be fine. all
Right.
I mean,
Right.
but if I don't wanna get much beyond that, if I can help it.
Okay, that works.
All right, so everybody care? Everybody okay?
That sounds great.
Chris, you have anything else?
Well, one last thing, so that ARPA money coming in, that increases our free cash because we're paying things that we would have normally paid for
From
with
free
free
cash.
cash
Right.
with
Right.
this money.
Right.
Exactly.
But
So
if we don't spend it all, that money can't go to free cash. We have to spend it.
You're exactly
That's
right.
the
Okay,
issue.
just
We
checking.
would have liked to have put it
Okay.
Yeah,
back
it has to
in
be
the pot.
separately accounted for.
Right,
Right.
okay.
So we can't.
All right.
So we have, but, anything we spend it on, we'll put a list together, then we'll run it through our advisor.
Counsel, yeah.
Our advisor, which is,
Yeah.
they're an accounting firm that confirms that money's eligible under the
Clifton
federal,
Lassett.
under the
Okay.
federal guidelines.
All right,
And then we'll make sure, and then, so we'll try and do that before we even present it to you,
wonderful.
okay? All right, so with that in mind, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and I'll call for a second meeting as soon as we have that information available.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, have a
I'll
second?
second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Chris votes yes.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone, appreciate all your help, and appreciate the fact that we got through this as efficiently as we could today. All right.